Chapter 1395. Rumble. The sea demon domain was compressed to only a few hundred meters. The domain water was extremely turbid, and it was still roaring and struggling. Heavenly Venerable Evil Light, hurry up and help me. Heavenly Venerable Sea Demon shouted at Heavenly Venerable Evil Light. Without needing Heavenly Venerable Sea Demon's reminder, Heavenly Venerable Evil Light was already prepared to take action when he saw that the sea demon domain was about to be broken. With Heavenly Venerable Evil Light as the center, a thick grey light spread out. This grey light seemed to have a spirit. It was not in the shape of a bundle, but rather like a snake. The ninth domain, Evil Light Domain. Kid, it's not too late to surrender now. Evil Light Heavenly Venerable's killing intent was also aroused. Yi Chen was too powerful, and two powerful enemy geniuses had to be strangled ahead of time. Once the demonic race couldn't contend against the human race, the evil spirit race would be even more powerless. The two ninth domains attacked Yi Chen's Green Lotus Sword domain from the left and right. But this way, the situation became strange. It seemed as if Yi Chen was accepting their challenge. Gradually, the three domains reached a balance, and no one could take another step forward. We are both at the early stage of the ninth domain. My Green Lotus Sword domain is stronger than the other party's domain, but it's still a bit difficult to fight one against two. Raising his head, Yi Chen said in a clear voice, "You too, I wonder how my Green Lotus Sword domain is? Mph, so what if your domain is strong? Have a taste of my Sea Demon Towering Seal." Heavenly Venerable Sea Demon raised his right hand and slapped toward Yi Chen. The violent palm energy was like a flood, turning into a large seal along the way. It tore apart the five-colored lotus and smashed toward Yi Chen. If it had been the Yi Chen of the past, he would have died if he had not avoided this palm. However, things were different now. Clang! Yi Chen pulled out the heavenly sword, and he slashed the large seal apart. With the Green Lotus Sword domain, the Sea Demon Towering Seal's power was not even 100%. Yi Chen could easily slash it apart. Impossible. How did your strength increase so much? Heavenly Venerable Sea Demon could not calm down anymore. It was one thing for Yi Chen's sword domain to be so powerful, but he was actually so powerful as well. This is all thanks to you. Speaking of which, I still have to thank you. However, these are two separate matters. I've said it before, my return today will be the day you die. In terms of cultivation realm, Yi Chen was naturally inferior to Empyrean Sea Fiend. Empyrean Sea Fiend's martial Dao Yuan spirit was at least mid-silver rank, or even high silver rank, while Yi Chen was only at peak early silver rank. However, in terms of heart power, Yi Chen far surpassed his opponent. Presently, Yi Chen's heart power had already reached the advanced stage, and coupled with his ceaselessly improving sword intent, it was sufficient to offset his opponent's advantage in cultivation and even surpass him. Don't you think it's too early for you to be arrogant? Empyrean Sea Devil had a gloomy expression. His hands were covered in a layer of black light and a powerful aura spread out from his hands. One could vaguely see that the black light was a pair of gloves. You should be proud of yourself for forcing me to use the power of a heavenly saint artifact. Watch as I break through your sword domain. It was the same Sea Devil monstrous seal, but this time, Empyrean Sea Devil's power was more than 100 times stronger. Previously, he had only used a portion of the Heavenly Saint artifact's power. That portion of power had already fused into his palms, and he had yet to refine most of the remaining power. Rumble. The void trembled as a black seal smashed into the five-colored green lotus. Before the seal arrived, the five-colored green lotus had already begun to fester, clearly unable to withstand the power of the Sea Devil monstrous seal. A Heavenly Saint artifact is indeed a Heavenly Saint artifact. Yi Chen sighed. Not only did a Heavenly Saint artifact possess vast power, but the characteristics it contained had also reached a new level. For example, if the Heavenly Sword evolved into a Heavenly Saint artifact, then the power of light would reach an even higher boundary. This level of power of light would not be much weaker than pure power. The other party's Heavenly Saint artifact gloves clearly contained the power of darkness. This was an existence completely different from the power of light, and it had the effect of melting everything. Of course, with the defensive power of the Black Tortoise sacred armor, Yi Chen could completely ignore the other party's attack. However, he didn't plan on exposing the Black Tortoise sacred armor. There was no need to use the Black Tortoise sacred armor to deal with the other party. The heavenly sword was sheathed and the firmament sword was unsheathed. Grasping the firmament sword, Yi Chen slashed out, and an incomparably thick sword light slashed towards the Black Seal. The Black Seal collapsed, and the thick sword light instantly tore through the Sea Devil domain, shooting towards Empyrean Sea Devil. The probing had ended, and it was time to kill. Not good. Empyrean Evil Light was shocked. A curved saber appeared in his hand, and a grey saber light intercepted the thick sword light. Everything was out of his control. Not only was Yi Chen's strength powerful to an incredible degree, but he also had a Heaven Saint artifact in his hand. Originally, he had planned on watching the show and seeing how Empyrean Sea Devil would kill Yi Chen, but now that he was watching the show, Empyrean Sea Devil would die without a doubt. The other party's Heaven Saint artifact seemed to be more than just a one-star Heaven Saint artifact. That sword technique was also extraordinary and had reached a very terrifying realm. Dang! The grey saber light was directly bounced off, but the thick sword light also deviated from its trajectory, brushing past half of Empyrean Sea Devil's body. Blood evaporated, and Empyrean Sea Devil lost a third of his body. The Earth Saint artifact armor on his body couldn't block this sword force at all. Ah! Empyrean Sea Devil screamed. Yi Chen's sword had even cut off a third of his martial arts Yuan spirit, leaving only 60 to 70% of his origin. Whether it was an Earth Saint artifact or a Heaven Saint artifact, when the enemy was directly injured, their origin would be damaged. For example, Earth Demon Venerable had once used the Bloodlust Spear to injure Golden Buddha Supreme's origin, causing him to spend hundreds of years to finally recover. Yin Yang Wuji. Since his sword didn't kill Empyrean Sea Devil, Yi Chen used the Yin Yang sword technique's third move, Yin Yang Wuji. In an instant, the fish-like black and white sword chi shot out, its speed even faster than the heavy sword technique. Those with poor eyesight couldn't even see the sword chi. Since Empyrean Sea Devil was injured, Empyrean Evil Light naturally wouldn't just stand by and watch. He used a saber technique to block the black and white sword chi, but a strange scene occurred. The black and white sword chi seemed to have a spiritual nature and continuously avoided his saber attack. Empyrean Evil Light was slightly careless, and the black and white sword chi flashed past and rushed towards Empyrean Sea Devil. Empyrean Sea Devil's injuries weren't light, but he still had combat strength. His palms wrapped in black light turned into phantoms that fought with the black and white sword chi. Evil Star, let's go. On the city wall, the first demon Venerable suddenly soared into the sky and flew into the distance, abandoning Empyrean Sea Devil and Empyrean Evil Light. First Demon Venerable, Evil Star looked at the battlefield and then at the distant First Demon Venerable. He shook his head and turned to follow the First Demon Venerable. Before leaving, he stared at Yi Chen in shock. This was too terrifying. In just over 100 years, he had far surpassed everyone. No wonder the First Demon Venerable said that Empyrean Sea Devil had ruined his momentum. If Empyrean Sea Devil hadn't forced Yi Chen into a desperate situation, Yi Chen most likely wouldn't have such strength. Mortals really couldn't guess what was going on. The First Demon Venerable and Evil Star left so suddenly that no one could react. On the battlefield, Yi Chen secretly nodded. The other party had left very decisively. Otherwise, he wouldn't have minded dealing with Empyrean Sea Devil and Empyrean Evil Light after he dealt with them. But now, there was no need to do so. He would kill Empyrean Sea Devil and Empyrean Evil Light first. Leaving them alive was a disaster. It's all over. Kang Sai Wei breathed a sigh of relief. That's right. It feels like a dream. Ying Liexiong and the others looked at each other and sighed. I told you there was nothing to worry about. History has proven that anyone from the outside who wants to unify the Wilderness God continent will never have a good ending. The Battle Pagoda tribe's leader Tai Tan drank a mouthful of liquor and said indifferently, "Kill." The range of the Green Lotus sword domain shrank and superimposed with his protective sword energy. Yi Chen gripped the firmament sword and attacked Empyrean Sea Devil and Empyrean Evil Light. Empyrean evil light was shocked and slashed at Yi Chen several hundred times. Ding ding dang dang. A scene that made him want to die happened. The saber light landed on Yi Chen's body and was actually bounced off. Yi Chen wasn't injured at all. With a puff, the firmament sword flashed and Empyrean evil light's body was split into two. In close combat, an Earth Saint artifact armor absolutely couldn't block the destruction of a Heaven Saint artifact. Empyrean evil light was directly hit and even his martial path Yuanshan was killed. Finally, Yi Chen stared at Empyrean Sea Devil, who was fighting like a cornered beast. I didn't expect that I, Empyrean Sea Devil, who has dominated the universe for so many years, would actually be killed by a junior. What a joke. But if you want me to die, you must pay the price. Explode. As he spoke, Empyrean Sea Devil's body crazily expanded. Boom. Empyrean Sea Devil's body was smashed to pieces. A destructive shock wave surged out, mixed with the heart force, will, profound mysteries, domain, and so on that Empyrean Sea Devil had erupted before his death. The power of this explosion far surpassed his peak, reaching the quasi-demigod level. Yi Chen's eyes were cold as he allowed the shock wave to hit his body, causing ripples to appear. Chapter 1396. After dealing with Heavenly Venerate Sea Fiend and Heavenly Venerate Evil Light, Yi Chen returned the Sky Saint artifacts that belonged to Ying Liexiong and the others and kept the rest for himself. The two were very wealthy. They had 2 Sky Saint artifacts, a pair of gloves, a scimitar, and dozens of Earth Saint artifacts, all of which were above 6 stars. In addition, the two had collected a shocking amount of divine stones. Heavenly Venerate Sea Fiend had collected a total of 32 divine stones, and Heavenly Venerate Evil Light had collected 28 divine stones. Who knew how much they had gained in the Wild's God continent? Unfortunately, every star of a Sky Saint artifact required not 1 divine stone but 10 divine stones, and the failure rate was very high. Yi Chen did not dare to experiment with the Firmament Sword and the Xuanwu Sacred Armor. If he failed, he would have nowhere to cry. With the death of Heavenly Venerate Sea Fiend and Heavenly Venerate Evil Light, the demonic light tribe naturally fell apart, and the Wild's God continent returned to its original order. After spending half a year, Yi Chen comprehended the word left by the demigod and finally pushed the time ultimacy to perfection. The difference between perfection and time ultimacy was really big. Before perfection, Yi Chen felt like he was walking in mud, taking one step at a time. Now that the time ultimacy was at perfection, Yi Chen felt like he had become a fish swimming freely in a calm river without any obstacles. People who lived in space-time would naturally enjoy better treatment when their space-time ultimacy was at perfection. This was what Yi Chen believed. With the time ultimacy at perfection, Yi Chen's space-time sword art shone brightly again, and its power surpassed the 5 elements sword art. The third move, black hole, appeared, and 9 black holes appeared. The other words are no longer useful to me. It's time to leave. The book of martial arts left by the demigod was very useful to Yi Chen in the past, but now, it had little use. After all, it was already amazing for the things left by the demigod to have 1 or 2% of their essence. It was impossible for them to integrate all of their essence into the book of martial arts. Not to mention whether he could do it, even if he could, he would probably be too lazy to do it because it was too troublesome. Some things could not be reflected by words alone, and this was not a complete inheritance. You're leaving. Lan Yu fell silent after learning that Yi Chen was leaving. Yi Chen nodded. It's been several hundred years since we entered the Wild's God continent. It's time to go back. All good things must come to an end. Yeah, hundreds of years have passed without us noticing. Lan Yu still remembered the first time she met Yi Chen. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of years had passed. The scene from back then seemed to flash before her eyes. Even when it was time to leave, Yi Chen didn't return to the Eternal Tribe. He knew that with Lan Yu there, the Eternal Tribe should be very safe. Without him, it would be impossible for the Eternal Tribe to become a rank 7 or even rank 8 tribe. Rather than provoking public anger, it was better to let the Eternal Tribe develop peacefully. Several hundred years. For a moment, Yi Chen was eager to return home. Outside the barrier of the desolate god's secret realm, the 5 tribe leaders, War Bear, Kang Xueli, and Lan Yu were all silently watching Yi Chen leave. What an unforgettable character. Everyone sighed inwardly. The man and beast flew to the edge of the barrier of the desolate god's secret realm. Turning around, Yi Chen cupped his fists and said, "Everyone, if fate wills it, we will meet again." Saying that, he stepped into the barrier of the desolate god's secret realm, and Sky Splitter followed closely behind. "Yi Chen, I will find you." Right at this moment, Lan Yu suddenly shouted. Yi Chen's body paused slightly, and he entered the other side. "First Demon Sovereign, how are we going to leave?" In the sky, 2 figures were flying at high speed. They were the First Demon Sovereign and Evil Star. The First Demon Sovereign said indifferently, "We will return the way we came." "Then how did you get here?" Evil Star asked curiously. Although the desolate god continent is isolated from the rest of the world, it has its own destiny. Even the desolate god continent couldn't predict that a branch of the heavenly river would connect to the desolate god continent. Of course, it is extremely dangerous there. The desolate god's law and the heavenly river's law would clash from time to time. There is such a place. Evil Star sucked in a breath of cold air. The desolate god continent was created by the desolate god continent, and the heavenly river was the #1 scenery in the universe. Only the two would have a connection. After some thought, Evil Star realized that only the upper echelons of the demons knew about this, and they used this method to send the First Demon Sovereign in. "Sky Splitter, can you follow me back?" As they got closer to the ancient teleportation array, Yi Chen started to feel nervous. Sky Splitter was a beast of the desolate god continent, and it wasn't from the outside world. If he couldn't follow them out, Yi Chen would have to separate from them. This was something he didn't want to see. Roar. Sky Splitter let out a low roar. 3 months later, the man and beast arrived in front of an ancient teleportation array. It was a 6-point star teleportation array. It looked extremely old, as if it was made of simple stones. There was nothing special about it. "Let's go." Yi Chen and Sky Splitter walked into the teleportation array. Sword energy circulated, slowly pouring into the array. In the next moment, the shabby teleportation array lit up, emitting a light that could travel through space and time. Looking down, Yi Chen saw the universe. The man and beast seemed to be in a special space and time, in the gap between the desolate god continent and the universe. Swoosh. Then, the teleportation array flashed and disappeared. Yi Chen and Sky Splitter also disappeared from the desolate god secret realm. In the blink of an eye, 2 years passed. The First Demon Sovereign and Evil Star arrived at the edge of the desolate god continent. From here, they could see the outside world. A white river flowed from the void, forming a boundary with the edge of the desolate god continent. The heavenly river's law and the desolate god continent's law collided, bursting with chaotic lightning. Not to mention going forward, just looking at it with the naked eye would make one tremble in fear. This chaotic lightning wasn't simple lightning. It was the destructive lightning produced by the collision of different laws, and it only existed in the primal chaos. They waited for 3 days. "Now is the time. Follow me." With a swoosh, the First Demon Sovereign dashed out. "Wait for me," Evil Star yelled out and hurriedly followed up. A few meters thick wave of the desolate god continent broke into the desolate god continent. Waves splashed everywhere, and the laws burst out, temporarily expelling the desolate god's law. It was indeed the safest time to go up. Once the desolate god's law recovered and collided with the heavenly river's law, the two wouldn't have a chance to enter the river. With a splash, the two jumped into the wave of the desolate god continent. However, the wave was still inside the desolate god continent. The moment the two jumped in, chaotic lightning surged outside, and the desolate god's law and the heavenly river's law collided again. The size of the wave of the desolate god continent was rapidly whittled away. Evil Star even felt that he and the desolate god continent were separated by only a finger's thickness of the desolate god continent. Swoosh. The wave of the desolate god continent retreated, merging into the desolate god continent tributary. That was close. Evil Star broke out in a cold sweat, fear lingering in his heart. Chapter 1397. In the starry sky, the most difficult thing to determine was one's position. Without a reference, one would have to take many wrong paths. After leaving the wilderness god continent, Yi Chen found himself and Heaven Splitter in an unfamiliar starry sky. The netherworld sacred eye operated. Through space-time, Yi Chen saw the starry sky billions of light-years away. Unfortunately, it was also an unfamiliar starry sky. Yi Chen couldn't use it to find the route back to the 4 major life star fields. The starry sky wasn't boundless, but very few people could reach the edge of the cosmos. As a result, there were 2 theories. The first theory was that the starry sky was very, very big, and it was very difficult to reach the edge of the cosmos. The second theory was that the space-time at the edge of the cosmos was curved. You could clearly reach the edge of the cosmos, but you wouldn't know that you were there because you couldn't see the things outside the cosmos. Apart from that, even if you were heading in the right direction, you would never be able to leave the cosmos. Heaven Splitter, let's go. Left with no other choice, Yi Chen and Heaven Splitter could only choose a direction. Heaven Splitter's body had become incomparably huge. It was billions of miles in size, even bigger than the largest life star. Yi Chen's body had also returned to its normal height. He was 8 meters tall, 1 meter taller than the Golden Buddha Supreme. This was mainly due to the Immortal sword body, which could resist the attacks of peak legend rank Supremes. Heaven Splitter shrunk to 100 meters tall and 200 meters long. In other words, it was 30 meters tall and 70 to 80 meters long. Yi Chen sat on it. Heaven Splitter let out a loud roar that shook the entire starry sky. Then, it flew in the direction Yi Chen pointed out. Heaven Splitter's speed couldn't be described as chasing the stars and chasing the moon. Sitting on Heaven Splitter's back, Yi Chen could see dead galaxies passing by. When passing by a galaxy shrouded in dark mist, Yi Chen suddenly patted Heaven Splitter's head. Sky Splitter stopped precisely, its front claws gently scratching at the void, creating cracks in the void. What a surging darkness aura! A trace of surprise appeared on Yi Chen's face. Galaxies were generally not small, with a diameter of at least a few thousand light-years, and the bigger ones could even have a diameter of several 100,000 light-years. This dark fog was able to isolate the senses, and Yi Chen's netherworld saint eye could only penetrate 1 light-year before it was unable to penetrate any further, and was unable to clearly see what was inside the galaxy. Could it be a secret realm? Yi Chen frowned. Let's go in and take a look. Yi Chen was not afraid of any dangers in the galaxy. Other than demigods, he was confident that he could escape unscathed from anyone. Riding Sky Splitter, Yi Chen charged into the foggy nameless galaxy. Woo woo woo, the dark mist in the galaxy was extremely dense, and it constantly changed shape as if there were billions of demons hidden within. It caused one's heart to be filled with traces of fear and hallucinations. Stretching out his hand, a large amount of dark mist gathered in Yi Chen's hand, finally shrinking into a ball of darkness. After carefully sensing it, Yi Chen muttered to himself, "The universe is truly vast. I've never seen such an aura before." As he continued forward, the dark mist became denser, and the range of Yi Chen's netherworld saint eye was only 100 billion li. There's someone fighting. Through the netherworld saint eye, Yi Chen saw that a figure was fighting with countless black shadows tens of billion li away. Looking closely, this figure was the barbarian race's female sovereign, Supreme 7 Moons. Her enemies were black monsters that looked like bats, and their numbers were staggering. With a sweep of the netherworld saint eye, there were at least tens of thousands of them, and new black monsters would join in from time to time. Yi Chen waved his hand, and space-time distorted. When he reappeared, he was already near Supreme 7 Moons. Sensing the space-time ripple, Supreme 7 Moons looked back and was stunned. She couldn't help but exclaim, "Supreme Yi." She had seen Yi Chen before when Supreme Lang Ya held a gathering. However, she heard that Yi Chen had disappeared for hundreds of years. She didn't expect to see him here today. "Supreme 7 Moons, long time no see. What are these things?" Yi Chen smiled. "These are dark beasts, blood-sucking beasts. These things are very annoying. Unless they are completely annihilated, they will use the dark mist to revive infinitely. At first, there were more than 100,000 of them, but after 3 days and 3 nights of killing, there are still so many left. Fortunately, you came. After killing for 3 days and 3 nights, Supreme Seven Moons was already very tired. She didn't doubt that without Yi Chen, she wouldn't have been able to leave this dark star system. Who knew how many more blood-sucking beasts would be chasing after them? Most of the blood-sucking beasts had the strength of an 8th heaven sovereign, and some of the leaders had the strength of an ordinary sovereign. No wonder Supreme Seven Moons was so tired, Yi Chen thought. Too lazy to use martial arts, Yi Chen released the green lotus sword domain. Suddenly, a 5-colored lotus appeared, covering tens of thousands of blood-sucking beasts. In the next moment, these blood-sucking beasts collapsed. Supreme Seven Moons was stunned. Tens of thousands of blood-sucking beasts were dealt with by a sword domain. Supreme Yi, what's your strength now? Supreme Seven Moons asked curiously. Yi Chen didn't hide it. I was lucky to become a legendary sovereign. Legendary sovereign? Supreme Seven Moons thought she was hearing things. Yi Chen was only 1,000 years old, but he had become a legendary sovereign. Are you telling the truth? Supreme Seven Moons didn't believe it. What's the point of lying to you? Yi Chen smiled. It was normal for Supreme Seven Moons to doubt him. If he hadn't entered the wilderness god continent, he wouldn't have his current strength. It was already very good for him to become a peak super sovereign. After all, sovereigns lived for more than 100,000 years. How could they improve so quickly? As expected of Supreme Yi. I've learned a lot. After a while, Supreme Seven Moons finally accepted the fact that Yi Chen was a legendary sovereign. Many things must have happened in the universe over the past few centuries. It was Yi Chen's luck that he met Supreme Seven Moons. Otherwise, he didn't know how long it would take him to find a way back to the 4 major lifestar systems. Supreme Seven Moons sighed. In the few centuries you disappeared, the humans' Black Wind Stream and the demons' Mora Death Prison opened. All the sovereigns locked in there escaped, and some legendary sovereigns appeared. Now, the highest commander of the Demons Alliance is Demon Sage Goro, and the highest commander of our human alliance is Sword Sage White Pole. They're both demigods with earth-shattering strength. I felt that my strength was too low, so I came out to look for opportunities. Demigod. Yi Chen was shocked. He didn't expect such a big thing to happen in the past few centuries. He thought that he was strong enough. Fortunately, the human race has won. Yi Chen didn't have the confidence to fight against a demigod. Even with the Black Tortoise divine armor and the 15th level of the Immortal sword body, he probably wouldn't be able to block a demigod's attack. By the way, I heard that a legendary sovereign of the human race is going to marry a good friend of yours next year. Her name is Yang Qingxian. She's a new sovereign. Supreme Seven Moons suddenly mentioned something related to Yi Chen. Oh, there's such a thing? Yi Chen's expression turned cold, and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Supreme Yi, don't be impulsive. I believe that with your strength and status, as long as you go back, he'll give you some face. There's no need to have a conflict. Supreme Seven Moons could feel the cold air coming from Yi Chen's body, so she couldn't help but remind him. In her opinion, Yi Chen was just an ordinary legendary sovereign. He couldn't fight against those old legendary sovereigns, so it wasn't a good thing to have a conflict. Chapter 1398. The number of blood-sucking beasts in the Dark Galaxy was much more than he had imagined. Every time they appeared, they would be densely packed. The highest number was 500,000. Not to mention the fact that Seven Moon Sovereign was only a peak powerful supreme being. Even if she were a super supreme being, she wouldn't be able to withstand the continuous attacks of 500,000 blood-sucking beasts. After all, there were also supreme-level beasts among the blood-sucking beasts. Normally, there would be one with the strength of an ordinary supreme being among 1,000 blood-sucking beasts. Of course, when one's power reached a certain level, there would be no danger. No matter how many blood-sucking beasts there were, they would just be food for Yi Chen. Sweeping through everything in their way, Yi Chen and Supreme Seven Moons rushed out of the Dark Galaxy. This place is about 20 years away from the Barbarian territory and the 4 major lifestar regions. I'm afraid you won't be able to make it back in time. No matter how fast Yi Chen was, he would only be a few times faster than her. He wouldn't be able to make it back in time next year. 7 Moons had to remind Yi Chen. It's fine. I'll know once I try. Ever since his space-time law reached completion, Yi Chen had never traveled at full speed. After all, he wasn't in a hurry before. Traveling at full speed consumed a lot of sword energy. He invited 7 Moons to sit on Skysplitter's back. Yi Chen waved his hand, and an invisible space-time power covered Skysplitter. The next moment, the two of them became transparent. It was as if they were one with space-time. As for their speed, they traveled through endless space-time in the blink of an eye. 7 Moons' eyes widened. It was too fast. She couldn't see her surroundings at all. Every time she focused, she was already in another place. He can't be planning to make it back to the 4 major lifestar regions in a year, right? 7 Moons was uncertain. She didn't know how fast they were, so she couldn't judge. White Tiger Star region. Blue Sea Star, a level 9 life star. Supreme Skyhook was in a good mood. In a month, he would marry the new Supreme, Yang Qingxian. Everything went so smoothly because his power had completely recovered. True Martial Supreme, who had a divine item, couldn't compete with him and was defeated in a few moves. As for Yang Qingxian herself, she had been adamantly against it at first, which made him very angry. However, there was nothing he could do. After all, she was a supreme, and he could not force her openly. Otherwise, it would incur the wrath of the masses, and it would be hard to explain to the White Pole Sword Saint when he came out of seclusion. Although he was a legendary supreme, the White Pole Sword Saint would not kill him because of this matter, but he would definitely be imprisoned. Fortunately, there was always a way. He thought of a way. He had cultivated a secret technique that could affect people's subconscious. With his power as a legendary supreme, it was easy for him to brand the secret technique in Yang Qingxuan's Sea of Soul. As time passed, the secret technique's influence grew. 30 years ago, Yang Qingxian finally agreed, but she said that she would marry her after she came out. For Supreme Skyhook, 30 years wasn't a long time, so he naturally agreed. That genius named Yi Chen disappeared for hundreds of years. Who knows if he's dead or not? Even if he's alive, when he comes back, Yang Qingxian will be my wife. No one has the right to say anything. White Pole Sword Saint might be dissatisfied, but I didn't force her. She agreed herself. I believe that White Pole Sword Saint won't have too much of a reaction for the big picture. After all, I'm a legendary supreme. Supreme Skyhook was secretly proud of himself. Elder, Supreme True Martial is here to see you. At this moment, a guard's voice came from outside the palace. Paragon Skyhook had many descendants in the 4 major lifestar regions, and they had formed families and sects. Now, all of these forces had gathered and lived on the Blue Sea Star. There were hundreds of millions of members, and they recognized him as their ancestor. It was like they had returned to their roots. Invite him in. Supreme Skyhook frowned. This Supreme True Martial was really annoying. He had been visiting more and more frequently. After a while, Supreme True Martial entered the palace. True Martial, why are you here again? Supreme Skyhook shouted. Supreme True Martial frowned and looked at Supreme Skyhook. Supreme Skyhook, I hope you will think twice and think about the big picture. What do you mean by think thrice before you act? What do you mean the big picture? Supreme Skyhook didn't give Supreme True Martial any face and scolded him. Supreme True Martial's face turned green. I don't know what you did to make her agree, but you clearly know that her friend is a peerless genius of the human race. Are you going to destroy the peace of the human race for your own selfish desires? Sword Saint Bai Ji will punish you when he comes out. Supreme Skyhook sneered. First, you have to know that I didn't force her. Second, this has nothing to do with you. Plus, I'm a legendary supreme. Even if I have to think about the big picture, the other party has to think about the big picture. Do you think that a superior will think about the big picture because of a subordinate? What big picture? This was something that could only be used to scare the newbies. To him, he was the big picture. Since when did he have to think about the big picture? What a joke. Every time they talked, they parted on bad terms. This time was no exception. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The day of Supreme Skyhook and Yang Qingxuan's wedding had arrived. The Blue Diamond Island of Blue Sea Star was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. The wedding of a Supreme was different from an ordinary wedding. The extravagance was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Tens of thousands of red lanterns were everywhere, and each one was not an ordinary one. The wick was taken from the most precious part of the eternal lantern fish. Once lit, one would feel relaxed and happy. No matter how many worries one had, they would vanish like smoke in thin air. The red carpet on the ground was made from the fur of fierce beasts, extending far and wide. The dishes, wine, and fruits of the banquet were all extremely precious. Even eighth-layer life and death heavenly kings couldn't eat them. Supreme Skyhook was a legendary sovereign, so practically all the sovereigns had come to attend the wedding, including several legendary sovereigns of the same status as him and some other miscellaneous characters. The entire Blue Diamond Island had tens of thousands of guests, divided into different regions. The deeper one went, the more distinguished one's status became. Those with lower status could only sit outside and enjoy the wedding wine. 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign has arrived. An endless stream of people arrived. Suddenly, a voice rang out, and everyone couldn't help but look over. Not far away, a majestic middle-aged man walked over with a majestic gait. He was 25 meters tall, and he was another legendary sovereign of the human race, 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign. Haha, Supreme Skyhook, congratulations. 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign cupped his fists. 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign, we've been waiting for you. Supreme Skyhook promptly went up to greet him. Among the current legendary sovereigns of the Human Alliance, 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign was without a doubt the strongest. He was a peak legendary sovereign, and his relationship with 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign had always been pretty good. This is just a small token of my appreciation. 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign came with a congratulatory gift, which was delivered by someone beside him. You're too polite. Supreme Skyhook's face was flushed. Chapter 1399. The 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign is here too. Now, all the legendary Supremes are here except for the barbarian tribe. The Human Alliance currently had 6 legendary Supremes, one more than the Demons Alliance. However, the Human Alliance did not have the upper hand in the first battle. Instead, they were at a disadvantage. The main reason was that the legendary Supremes of the Demons Alliance were all experts. They had 2 peak legendary Supremes, while the Human Alliance only had 1 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign. 1 peak legendary Supremes was equivalent to several high-level legendary Supremes. 1 more legendary Supremes could not make up for the difference. It seems that the 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign and Supreme Skyhook have a good relationship. Even if Supreme Yi returns, he probably won't be able to affect Supreme Skyhook. Sigh, what can we do? Only the White Pole Sword Sage can punish Supreme Skyhook in the entire Human Alliance. I don't think the White Pole Sword Sage will punish Supreme Skyhook severely because of this matter. After all, Supreme Skyhook is a legendary Supremes. His role is irreplaceable. Supreme Skyhook is very cautious. He chose to hold the wedding when the White Pole Sword Sage is in seclusion. He acted first and reported later. Those who came to the wedding naturally did not support Supreme Skyhook. It was only because of the situation. After all, if they did not come, it would be obvious that they looked down on Supreme Skyhook. For a moment, everyone was discussing in private. Of course, everyone was communicating through the soul. Unless Supreme Skyhook deliberately targeted them, no one would be able to hear it. Outside the Cerulean Sea Star, a figure passed through the atmosphere and flew towards the Blue Diamond Island. It was the white-haired Dugu Ju who carried a long saber on his back. Now, his aura was extremely powerful, no weaker than that of the 7 Moons Supremes. He had obviously reached the level of a peak legendary Supremes. Soon, Dugu Ju appeared above the Blue Diamond Island. Supreme Skyhook, I advise you to cancel this wedding. Whether it was because of his friendship with Yi Chen and Yang Qingxian, or because they both came from Elysium, Duguju wanted to stop this wedding. Little guy, do you know who you are talking to? Get down here. Paragon Skyhook's face darkened. Today was his wedding day, but someone dared to be so blind. He waved his hand, and Duguju fell to the ground as if he was struck by lightning. Compared to a legendary paragon, Duguju was too weak. At the side, the nine-son Heavenly Venerate shook his head. What was wrong with geniuses nowadays? Just because they had a bit of talent, they thought they could do whatever they wanted. Didn't they know that this was a world where the strong preyed on the weak? No matter how talented they were, it would take at least tens of thousands of years or even hundreds of thousands of years for them to become a legendary paragon. During this period of time, the weak had to have the awareness of the weak. Many Supremes also shook their heads inwardly. It was too impulsive to cause trouble at a legendary supremacy's wedding. They were considering if they should distance themselves from Duguju. Supremacy Skyhook wasn't a good person. Although offending him wouldn't result in death, it wouldn't be good for them. Those who were close to him would most likely be implicated. Duguju, don't be impulsive. This isn't the place for you to cause trouble. We have to endure against a legendary paragon. We'll talk about it when we're strong enough. A supremacy who was on good terms with Duguju secretly transmitted a message to Duguju. Suddenly, his expression changed. Paragon Skyhook had inadvertently glanced at him and seemed to have eavesdropped on his conversation. Paragon Skyhook's face instantly turned pale. Supreme Skyhook snorted coldly. The formless sound wave made the supremacy even paler. He didn't dare to raise his head again. You're called Duguju, right? If you leave now, you still have a chance to get my forgiveness. Otherwise, don't blame me for embarrassing you. Supreme Skyhook didn't care about Duguju at all. A legendary paragon is just a shameless scoundrel. Wait for Supreme Yi's return if you dare. For some reason, whenever he was in trouble, Duguju would always think of Yi Chen. Even though he was helping Yi Chen and Yang Qingxian this time, he also thought of Yi Chen. As long as Yi Chen was there, anything could be solved. Duguju smiled bitterly in his heart. Looks like I won't be able to get rid of his influence in this lifetime. Fine, you're the red flower, and I'll be the green leaf. How dare you? Supreme Skyhook was enraged. He waved his hand, and a hook shadow with chains shot out and hooked onto Duguju's body. Clatter, clatter. Supreme Skyhook directly hung Duguju up. Blood flowed along the chains. If you weren't a supremacy of the human race, I would have ground your bones to dust. Supreme Skyhook gritted his teeth and said sinisterly. Supreme Skyhook, what are you trying to do? Outside the atmosphere, two more figures flew over. They were Supreme True Marshal and Supreme Golden Buddha. They still thought that Supreme Skyhook was playing with fire. Yi Chen's progress was unimaginable. Once he returned after disappearing for hundreds of years, he might be able to turn the world upside down. Of course, there was another reason why they were biased towards Yi Chen. These supremacies imprisoned in the Morrow Death Prison were all ancient supremacies. They weren't from the same generation as them, so they didn't take them seriously. In the entire Human Race Alliance, the supremacies were divided into two groups. One group was made up of ancient supremacies, and the other was made up of supremacies that were born in the recent hundreds of thousands of years. Supreme True Marshal and Supreme Golden Buddha were naturally closer to the supremacies that were born a few 100,000 years ago. Supreme True Marshal and Supreme Golden Buddha were naturally closer to the supremacies that were born a few 100,000 years ago. As for Sword Saint Whitepole, he was of a higher level and wouldn't be biased towards anyone. In fact, not only the Human Race Alliance, but the Demons Alliance was also facing the same situation. Although the Human Race Alliance and the Demons Alliance were at war, everyone knew that no one could do anything to the other within a short period of time. It wasn't a moment of life and death yet, so there was naturally less disharmony between the two sides. Supreme Golden Buddha was 23 meters tall and his body was shining with golden light. He wasn't any shorter than Supreme Skyhook. He slapped at the chain, trying to break it. Supreme True Marshal also attacked the chain with the True Marshal Divine Mace. Do you really think I won't dare to do anything to you? Supreme Skyhook was completely enraged after being provoked again and again at his own wedding. Countless hook shadows shot out from his body and swept towards Supreme True Marshal and Supreme Golden Buddha. Clang, clang, clang. Supreme Golden Buddha flew back with a pale face. He could take the attack of a mid-level legendary supremacy, but Supreme Skyhook was a high-level legendary supremacy. He couldn't take it. Supreme True Marshal was the same. In fact, he was in an even worse state than Supreme Golden Buddha. In terms of defense, he wasn't as good as Supreme Golden Buddha even with his divine armor. He could only use the True Marshal divine mace. Get down here. More hook shadows shot out. Supreme Skyhook wanted to take down Supreme True Marshal and Supreme Golden Buddha. He wanted to let everyone know that their era of power was over and that his authority as a legendary supremacy was inviolable. Suddenly, a transparent wave burst out. 2 people and 1 beast appeared in the sky. One of them was a young man in a blue robe. He swung his hand and the hook shadows were cut into pieces. Supreme Skyhook, your good days are over. Chapter 1400. Yi Chen. Supremacy Yi. Supremacy Yi is back. He's so strong. He destroyed Supremacy Skyhook's attack with a single palm strike. Dugu Ju, Supremacy True Marshal, Supremacy Golden Buddha, Supremacy Skyhook, and Heavenly Venerate 9 Sons were all looking at the blue-robed young man in the sky. They completely ignored Sky Splitter and Supremacy 7 Moons. It couldn't be helped. Yi Chen's appearance was like the sun. Those around him were easily overshadowed by his radiance. Heavenly Venerate 9 Sons sized up Yi Chen with interest. In recent years, he had often heard about this genius named Yi Chen. It was said that he had the strength of a high-level supremacy before he disappeared. Heavenly Venerate 9 Sons didn't believe it at first, but now, it seemed that the rumors were true. Although Supremacy Skyhook hadn't used his full strength just now, and Supremacy True Marshal and Supremacy Golden Buddha weren't worthy of him using his full strength, as a high-level legendary supremacy, a casual attack could seriously injure a beginner legendary supremacy. Yet, Yi Chen had destroyed his attack with a single palm strike. Heavenly Venerate 9 Sons guessed that Yi Chen's strength should be stronger than Supremacy True Marshal and Supremacy True Marshal. Supremacy True Marshal was just a slightly stronger beginner legendary supremacy. This is going to be interesting. Let's see how Supremacy Skyhook will deal with this. Heavenly Venerate Giant Spirit was a legendary supremacy of the giant race. He was even taller than Heavenly Venerate 9 Sons. Just sitting there, he was already 600 feet tall. Standing up, he was at least 800 feet tall. Supremacies of the giant race had always been tall. This was their optimal battle form. I've heard many rumors about this little guy. I've finally met him. Not far from Empyrean Giant Miracle was another giant race legend supremacy, Supremacy Ying Sha. She was a female supremacy, and even though she was sitting there, she was also 500 feet tall. However, her figure was much more slender, and her features could be considered charming. Her arms were bare, and there were 2 golden bracelets on her wrists and upper arms. The legendary paragon of the barbarian race, Paragon Blooddrinker, looked very old. Although his withered body still looked strong, it wasn't full. Around his neck hung a necklace made of white bones, and on it were the skulls of all sorts of vicious beasts. These vicious beasts had been shrunk to the size of an adult's head, and the one at the very front was the head of a vicious beast that looked like a bull's head. Its withered body exuded a thick aura of savagery, as if it were a primitive tribe that ate raw meat and drank blood. He chuckled, his eyes flashing with a frightening light. Supreme Yi, you're finally back. The moment True Marshal Supreme and Gold Buddha Supreme saw Yi Chen, they couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. To be honest, they had shouldered too much pressure for Yi Chen. This pressure originally didn't belong to them. If it were someone else, there wouldn't be many who would dare to confront a high-rank legendary supreme like them. Supreme Yi, let's talk this out. I believe the other party will give you some face. Supreme True Marshal didn't forget to remind Yi Chen while heaving a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Yi Chen would completely fall out with Supreme Skyhook, which wouldn't be good for anyone. Most importantly, Supreme Skyhook was a high-level legendary supremacy, and although Yi Chen had broken his attack, Supreme Skyhook didn't kill him. After all, Supreme Skyhook wouldn't dare to openly kill him and Supreme Golden Buddha. Once Supreme Skyhook went all out, no matter how talented Yi Chen was, he wouldn't be able to block it. However, Supreme True Martial had forgotten something very important. This was the wedding venue of Supreme Skyhook, and if he compromised in front of so many people, he would become the joke of the universe. He couldn't afford to lose this face. At this moment, no one could make him lower his head except for the White Pole Sword Saint. Dugu Ju, thank you. Yi Chen saw Dugu Ju's actions. With the Netherworld Sacred Eye, he could see the situation on the Blue Diamond Island from far away. Don't forget that we're from the same place. Fortunately, you're here. Otherwise, I would have to retreat. Dugu Ju smiled, making a rare joke. He then glanced at Supreme Skyhook. Yi Chen, teach him a lesson. I believe that with your current strength, you won't be afraid of him. That's for sure. Yi Chen looked at Supreme Skyhook coldly. Supreme Skyhook tightly clenched his fists. The Zhen Yuan in his body boiled, faintly emitting a dense silver-white radiance. After being provoked again and again, Supreme Skyhook even had the urge to kill. Moreover, this was his wedding. This time, he had made up his mind to capture Yi Chen and the others and humiliate them to relieve the hatred in his heart. You're Yi Chen. Supreme Skyhook's voice was deep and gloomy. That's right. If you kneel down and apologize in front of so many people, I can forgive you. Remember, you don't have a choice. My tolerance is limited. Supreme Skyhook gave an ultimatum. I'll say the same to you. Kneel down and apologize, and you'll be saved. Yi Chen's attitude had shocked everyone. It seemed like he was going to fight back. Yi Chen, sigh. Supreme True Martial and Supreme Gold Buddha cursed inwardly. This was bad. Other than Sword Saint Baiji, no one else could control the situation. You're courting death. Supreme Skyhook roared, and his Skyhook domain suddenly erupted, covering several tens of thousands of li. Within the domain were numerous Skyhook phantoms condensed from domain power. Countless Skyhook phantoms slashed at Yi Chen, emitting a biting cold aura. At the same time, Supreme Skyhook's entire body soared into the sky, and a 2-meter-long hook appeared in his hand. The hook light flickered, and he charged at Yi Chen like a reaper from hell. Is Supreme Skyhook going to kill Yi Chen? That's not good. If Sword Saint Baiji finds out, all of us will be implicated. Everyone started to worry for Yi Chen when they saw Supreme Skyhook's stance. Yi Chen's expression didn't change at all. He was so calm that it was chilling. Supreme Skyhook, I'll let you know that there's always someone better than you out there. You're just an ant before me. Clang. Unsheathing the heavenly sword, Yi Chen's entire body seemed to have transformed into a sun brimming with sword chi as he slashed at Supreme Skyhook. Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise, 4 great sword auras blasted out simultaneously. 4 Elephant Sword Art, 4 Elephant Overlord Sword. Supreme Skyhook wasn't worthy of his full strength. To everyone's astonishment, Supreme Skyhook's Heaven Hook domain was torn apart by the sword chi. The domineering sword chi even knocked the hook out of Supreme Skyhook's hand and slashed at Supreme Skyhook. Fart. Supreme Skyhook spat out a mouthful of blood. He was sent flying like a scarecrow. He couldn't fight back at all. Silence. It was as quiet as a pool of stagnant water. Everyone stared blankly at Yi Chen, who was floating in the sky. Their mouths were wide open. They were all scared out of their wits. An advanced legendary supremacy couldn't even block a single strike from Yi Chen. To them, this was a fantasy. Chapter 1401. Supreme Skyhook was lying on the ground, his right hand pointing at Yi Chen. Puff. He only managed to utter a single word before spurting out another mouthful of blood. Today, he had lost all his face. He had never suffered such a huge blow in his entire life. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Supreme True Marshal looked at the Golden Buddha in disbelief. The Golden Buddha smiled bitterly. Haven't he created enough miracles? This time, it's a bit too much. Supreme True Marshal said. As expected, there's nothing you can't do. Dugu Ju saw all of this. What surprised him was that he wasn't surprised at all. It was as if Yi Chen's strength was reasonable and there was no need to be surprised. All the Supremes were shocked. Those below the Supreme's level were dumbfounded. Apart from the 9 Suns' Heavenly Sovereign, the other 3 legendary Supremes sighed with complicated expressions. There was shock, admiration, and a hint of jealousy and bewilderment in their eyes. Judging from the strength of Yi Chen's sword strike just now, all of them could only sigh at their own inferiority. They knew that even if they were Supreme Skyhook, they wouldn't be able to block that sword strike. Paragon Skyhook, I'll lock you up for 100 years so you can wake up. Yi Chen didn't plan to let Supreme Skyhook go. Of course, he wouldn't kill him either. That would only cause the human race alliance to fall apart. It was unwise. As he spoke, Yi Chen's figure flickered and appeared beside Supreme Skyhook, his hand grabbing at the latter's neck. How dare you? Supreme Skyhook screamed. His ethereal force and domain exploded, trying to shake off Yi Chen. Yi Chen sneered, and a black hole suddenly appeared in his right palm. The black hole fiercely revolved, sucking in Supreme Skyhook's Zhenyuan and domain. After so many years, Yi Chen had long since cultivated black hole style to the level of being able to use it as he pleased. He could even use it with his palm, and it was not limited to sword arts. Ah! Joyoung, save me. Supreme Skyhook begged the Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign for help. How dare you? Yi Chen, do you still care about the human race alliance? The Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign couldn't just sit back and watch. In fact, when Yi Chen appeared beside Supreme Skyhook, the Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign was already ready. He punched. His fist seemed to be condensed with thousands of suns. It was dazzling, hot, and seemed to be able to evaporate and explode everything. Supreme Martial Art, 9 Solar Fists. Yi Chen didn't expect the Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign to attack so suddenly. He didn't have time to draw his sword. Bang! Yi Chen's palm energy contained a suction force that could absorb all kinds of power. On the other hand, 9 Suns' Heavenly Sovereign's 9 Suns fist was invincible, constantly spewing blazing light and power. As soon as the two came into contact, a popping sound was heard. Then, they separated without any movement. In fact, with the strength of the two, a fierce battle might not destroy the blue sea star, but it would at least have terrible consequences. Although the Cerulean Sea Star was a level 9 life planet, it was not that easy to destroy. However, a battle between 2 legendary supremes would more or less cause some disasters. The previous battle had already caused tsunamis and dark clouds to cover the Cerulean Sea Star. Yi Chen, even if you are a peerless genius of the human race and a legendary supremacy, you have no right to insult another legendary supremacy. Where do you put the human race? Do you think you can do whatever you want just because you have the strength? The Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign was surprised to see Yi Chen block his punch unscathed. Then, he put on a serious face and put a big hat on Yi Chen. In his opinion, Yi Chen really didn't know what was good for him. You should say that to Supreme Skyhook. Everyone here knows what Supreme Skyhook has done. I don't need to say anything more, Yi Chen said coldly. What did Supreme Skyhook do? What proof do you have? The Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign asked Yi Chen. Yes, what did I do? Yang Qingxian personally agreed to this wedding. I didn't force her at all. Even if you are her good friend, you shouldn't go against her wishes. Or should I say, you like her, but she chose to marry me. You feel uncomfortable. Of course, this is just my guess. Supreme Skyhook was emboldened to see that the Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign was backing him up. He questioned Yi Chen. He didn't believe that Yi Chen really wanted to fall out with the Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign. Shameless. Dugu Ju cursed under his breath. Haha. Yi Chen threw his head back and laughed. His laughter spread throughout the blue sea star. Hearing this laughter, everyone was confused. But Supreme Skyhook and the Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign were a little scared. Ha 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 ha. Yi Chen kept laughing. Yi Chen, what are you laughing at? The Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign shouted angrily. The laughter stopped. Yi Chen said disdainfully, I'm laughing at all of you. Of course, if I was just an ordinary legendary supremacy, you might have succeeded. However, you've forgotten something. My strength is far above yours. You have no right to reason with me. 9 Suns Heavenly Venerate, since you're standing up for him, I'll capture you too and lock you up for 100 years. If you're not satisfied, you can all come at me. As soon as he finished his last sentence, a 5-colored green lotus suddenly appeared with him as the center. The lotus grew larger and larger, covering the entire blue sea star in an instant. The sea of blue sea star, which was originally filled with tsunamis, suddenly calmed down. Not a single wave was produced, and all the lives in the blue sea star came to a standstill. The entire world seemed to have gone silent. Impossible. The Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign roared. He found that his strength had been suppressed by more than 1,000 times. He couldn't even use 1,000th of his strength. Supreme Skyhook was even worse. He was directly pressed to the ground. High-level supremacies couldn't even resist the power of the Green Lotus Sword Domain. 9th-tier Sword Domain. How is this possible? At the same time, the other legendary supremes were also astonished. As for those below legendary supremes, they didn't even have the chance to speak. In front of the 9th layer Sword Domain, they didn't have the slightest bit of battle power. If Yi Chen wanted to kill them, all he had to do was wave his hand. This was the frightening power of the 9th layer Sword Domain. When a power reached its limit, it could dominate everything. Is this his true strength? Supreme 7 Moon was dumbfounded. She had been worried about Yi Chen, but now she could only smile bitterly. With such strength, there was no need to worry about him. Even if everyone joined forces, they wouldn't be his match. Roar. Sky Splitter shook his head and roared, his eyes filled with disdain. These idiots dared to go against their master. They were simply courting death. Step by step, he walked towards Supreme Skyhook. Yi Chen grabbed his neck and lifted him up. Then, he walked towards the Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign. Yi Chen, what are you doing? The Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign was afraid. He didn't even have 1,000th of his strength. Swish. With a teleportation, Yi Chen appeared in front of the Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign. He sent him flying with a sword strike and then appeared behind him at an even faster speed, grabbing his neck. Being grabbed by this hand, the Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign's body went limp. He couldn't use any of his strength. In terms of strength, he couldn't even be compared to the leaders of the 5 tribes. But Yi Chen could easily kill Sea Fiend and Evil Light. Chapter 1402. The 9 Suns Heavenly Venerate's face was ashen. He was a peak legendary supremacy, but he couldn't even retaliate against Yi Chen. Why was it like this? It shouldn't be like this. The 9 Suns Heavenly Venerate unintentionally glanced at everyone present, and his face turned even paler. He felt like he was a puppy being held by the other party, unable to struggle. Supreme Skyhook was even worse than the Joyoung Heavenly Sovereign. He closed his eyes, not wanting to see the gazes of the crowd, because those gazes would break him down. A strong sense of regret surged in his heart. If he had known that Yi Chen was so monstrous, he wouldn't have provoked Yang Qingxian even if he had 100 guts. But who knew that in just a few hundred years, he had grown to such a terrifying level? Was he still human? Supreme Yi, we're all from the Human Alliance. Why don't we just let it go? A supreme being that came out of the Morrow Death prison stood out and said, That's right, Supreme Exalt Yi. One should forgive and forget whenever possible. They didn't commit any major crimes, so why must you be so ruthless? Supreme Yi, although your strength is monstrous, imprisoning 2 legendary supremes is too much. It's better to leave some leeway. Those who spoke up for Heavenly Venerate 9 Suns and Supremacy Skyhook were all supremacies who had come out of the Morrow Death prison. Their intentions were simple. They wanted to pressure Yi Chen with their power. If Yi Chen released Heavenly Venerate 9 Suns and Supremacy Skyhook, that would naturally be the best outcome. However, if Yi Chen continued to be domineering and unreasonable, Once Sword Sage White Pole came out of seclusion, he would be in deep trouble. Yi Chen said lightly, if you do something wrong, you have to bear the corresponding consequences. If you do something wrong and there is no punishment at all, how can the Human Alliance fight against the Demons Alliance? Nothing can be accomplished without rules. Imprisoning them today is also for their own good. You don't have to say anything, I know what I'm doing. With Yi Chen as the center, invisible spacetime energy swept out, enveloping Sky Splitter, Seven Moons, Martial Supremacy, Golden Buddha Supremacy, and Duji Ju. In the next moment, the five of them and one beast disappeared without a trace. Too arrogant. The supreme martial artists who came out of the Morrow Death Prison were indignant. Just wait and see. When Sword Saint Bai Ji comes out of seclusion, he will definitely punish him. That's right. Other than Lord Sword Saint Bai Ji, no one else has the right to imprison an honorable. He's playing with fire. Whoosh. Somewhere in the starry sky of the White Tiger starfield, time and space distorted as Yi Chen and the others emerged. Supreme True Martial and Supreme Golden Buddha felt like they were in a dream. Supreme True Martial asked, Yi Chen, what level is your strength now? Are you a demigod? In his opinion, someone who could easily capture the Nine-Sun Heavenly Venerate had to be a quasi-demigod. Yi Chen shook his head. A demigod is much stronger than me. I should be considered a peak legendary supremacy. Without using the Firmament Sword, Yi Chen would be at this level. Once he used the Firmament Sword, Yi Chen's strength would be at the demigod level, just as Supreme True Martial had said. However, he didn't want to reveal the Firmament Sword. He still didn't know what kind of person Sword Saint Bai Ji was. After all, they both used swords. Excellent. Supreme Yi has such achievements at such a young age. You are comparable to a true god when they were young. Supreme Golden Buddha put his palms together and smiled. Those who could become true gods were all the kings of geniuses. Ordinary geniuses couldn't be compared to them. You flatter me. I only reached my current level because of a fortuitous encounter. Yi Chen said humbly. It's normal to have fortuitous encounters. Without them, there would be no true gods in this world. We all have fortuitous encounters, but our achievements are far from yours. Supreme True Martial was very emotional. Who didn't have fortuitous encounters? However, no matter how good the fortuitous encounters were, one had to have enough potential and talent. It didn't mean that one could achieve great things just by encountering a great fortuitous encounter. If there was such a good thing, the legendary supremacies in the universe would be running away in dissatisfaction. Yi Chen, what do you plan to do with the two of them? Supreme True Martial asked. Yi Chen said, Supreme Skyhook will be locked up for 100 years. Heavenly Venerable Joyang will be locked up for 10 years. Supreme True Martial nodded. Don't worry. I will speak up for Sword Saint Bai Ji. Supreme Skyhook had gone too far this time. He only had himself to blame for this result. Dugu Ju, I didn't expect you to become a supremacy after a few hundred years. Yi Chen looked at Dugu Ju. Dugu Ju said, if I don't become a supremacy soon, you will leave me in the dust. However, I still can't compare to you. Yi Chen smiled and said to everyone, I have gained a lot from this adventure. These sage artifacts are one of my gains. I will give them to you. Yi Chen took out 7 sage artifacts. 3 were offensive sage artifacts and 4 were defensive sage artifacts. So many sage artifact. Supreme True Martial was dumbfounded. Before this, there were no more than 10 sage artifacts in the universe. They were in the hands of the strongest people of each race. How could he not be shocked when Yi Chen took out 7 sage artifacts at once? Supreme Yi, this is too precious. Supreme Golden Buddha said hesitantly. Yi Chen said, I still have some. Since I have no use for extra sage artifacts, you can at least increase your strength. Supreme Yi, then I won't stand on ceremony. Supreme Seven Moons was overjoyed. She was a peak supremacy. With an offensive and defensive sage artifact, her battle strength was definitely comparable to a mid-level supremacy. Since that's the case, we'll gladly accept. Basically, no one could refuse a sage artifact. Supreme True Martial already had the True Martial Divine Truncheon, so Yi Chen gave him a Sage Artifact armor. His original armor was broken and definitely not as good as a complete one. However, among everyone, Supreme Golden Buddha's strength increased the most. His Golden Body 9th Refinement stage could block the attacks of a mid-level Legendary Supremacy. Now that he had a Sage Artifact armor, he could block the attacks of a peak Legendary Supremacy. He could even protect himself against the 9 Suns Heavenly Venerable. That was the benefit of having a high defense. Whoosh! Dugu Ju held a silver-white saber in his hand. He slashed with it, and the saber light swept across the entire universe. Good saber, Dugu Ju praised. He couldn't bear to part with it. The news of Yi Chen's domineering return and the capture of the 9 Suns Heavenly Venerable and Supreme Skyhook spread throughout the Human Race Alliance. It even spread to the Demons Alliance, shocking the entire universe. Everyone knew that other than Sword Sage Baiji and Demon Sage Jialuo, Yi Chen was definitely the #1 supremacy. No one could defeat him. Yi Chen finally had his own title, Sword Sage Green Lotus. Due to the fact that the sword domain Yi Chen had released was a 5-colored green lotus, he had obtained this title. As for Yang Qingxian, she had already returned to normal. Under Yi Chen's coercion, Supreme Skyhook told him everything. He knew that if he didn't say anything, Yi Chen would definitely torture him. No one knew when Sword Sage Baiji would come out of seclusion. If Yi Chen killed him in a rage, his death would be in vain. Sword Sage Baiji would at most imprison Yi Chen. Chapter 1403. Black Tortoise Star Field. All of you, listen up. You have 1 month to move out of the Black Tortoise Star Field. After 1 month, you will be killed without mercy. On this day, in the vast Black Tortoise Star Field, a mighty voice reverberated. It was Yi Chen's voice. Through the amplification of the power of space and time, Yi Chen's voice could travel far, far away, tens of thousands of light years, or even hundreds of thousands of light years. Of course, this would take time to transmit. The larger the area, the later the people at the edge of the area would hear the voice. If the voice was gathered into a single beam, Yi Chen could transmit it through space and time to a certain location in the demon domain. Perfected space and time profound had always been terrifying. It could achieve many things that were impossible in the past. In fact, Yi Chen could also take advantage of the time when Demon Saint Gallo was in closed-door cultivation to slaughter the Supremes of the Demons Alliance. With his strength, there was no need to worry about accidents. It would definitely be a one-sided sweep. However, he had his own considerations. Although Demon Saint Gallo was in closed-door cultivation, he was still a demigod. If he went too far, it was very likely that he would provoke the Demon Saint to kill him at all costs. At that time, even with Sword Saint Whitepole, he might not be safe. Of course, even if he did not slaughter the Supremes of the Demons Alliance, Demon Saint Gallo would probably still want to kill him, but at least it would be less. Comparing the two, Yi Chen naturally chose the latter. In any case, with his strength, other than Demon Saint Gallo, he did not need to be afraid of anyone. Once a war broke out, Sword Saint Whitepole would stop Demon Saint Gallo, and the remaining Supremes of the Demons Alliance combined would not be his opponent. This was a foregone conclusion. The various races of the Demons Alliance that had already taken root in the Black Tortoise Starfield were very unwilling. The Black Tortoise Starfield was rich in resources. After 1,000 years, they had already taken root here. Their descendants had already gotten used to the life here. Suddenly moving to another place was hard for anyone to accept. However, Sword Venerable Green Lotus was known as the #1 Supremes in the universe. They dared not joke around with their lives. Damn it, why should we move? In the Black Tortoise Starfield, a Supremes bellowed. Supreme Demon Blood, there's nothing you can do unless you can defeat Sword Venerable Green Lotus. Revered Swordsman Green Lotus? TMPH, I don't believe he's the #1 supreme being in the universe. Maybe he's just bragging. We haven't seen it with our own eyes. There's a chance that it's just boasting, but who's going to test it out? In any case, I don't dare. I'm just a super supreme being. A large number of puppet warships appeared in the Black Tortoise Galaxy's space. The moving work was in progress. However, not a single puppet warship had departed yet. Everyone was waiting. Sword Venerable Green Lotus, rumor has it that you are the #1 supremacy in the universe. I, Empyrean Evil Thunder, have come to seek guidance. The legendary supreme of the Demons Alliance, Heavenly Venerable Evil Thunder, had appeared. Heavenly Venerable Evil Thunder was a peak legendary paragon of the evil spirit race. His strength was not inferior to Heavenly Venerable Nine's sons. In the previous battle, he had suppressed Heavenly Venerable Nine's son from beginning to end, causing him to be in a sorry state. I accept your challenge. Space-time fluctuated, and Yi Chen appeared. Accompanying Yi Chen's appearance was a 5-colored green lotus. 9th level sword domain. Heavenly Venerable Evil Thunder was shocked as he was enveloped by the 5-colored green lotus. So what if it's the 9th level sword domain? Have a taste of my Evil Thunder divine palm. Heavenly Venerable Evil Thunder's hands were pitch black, and dark clouds surged. Large amounts of lightning rushed out, flashing toward Yi Chen. The lightning increased until it turned into a sea of lightning. Coupled with Heavenly Venerable Evil Thunder's Evil Thunder domain, it was simply invincible, wave after wave attacking Yi Chen. Black hole stance. With just one sword strike, Yi Chen completely neutralized Heavenly Venerable Evil Thunder's attack. It was as if the sea of lightning in the starry sky had never appeared. Heavy sword stance. With the second sword strike, Heavenly Venerable Evil Thunder perished. Heavenly Venerable Evil Thunder was not like Heavenly Venerable Sea Fiend and Heavenly Venerable Evil Light, nor was he comparable to the leaders of the 5 major tribes. Not only were the former stronger, but he also had a sage artifact armor. Heavenly Venerable Evil Thunder had nothing at all, so how could he block Yi Chen's attack? After this battle, the universe was shaken. Even without Yi Chen's threat, the evacuation of the Black Tortoise star field sped up thousands of times. Every day, hundreds of millions of puppet battleships set off, filled with members of various races. The Human Race Alliance was shocked beyond words. Although Yi Chen wasn't as strong as Sword Saint Whitepole, he had accomplished something that Sword Saint Whitepole couldn't. With a single order, the enemy retreated. How awe-inspiring. Some people even wondered if, with Yi Chen's strength, if the Morrow Death Prison and Black Wind Stream hadn't been opened, could he have completely destroyed the Demons Alliance, or even driven them into the world of life, allowing the Human Race Alliance to unify the entire universe and make the human race the overlord of the world? No matter how they thought about it, everyone felt that it was highly possible. Unfortunately, imagination was just imagination. There was still Demon Saint Whitepole and Demon Saint Whitepole above them. In history, a situation where one side was very strong while the other side was very weak rarely occurred. A month later, the Black Tortoise starfield became an empty starfield. The members of the Demons Alliance had all moved away, leaving not a single one behind. Of course, there were still some who had slipped through the net. Some had been forgotten, and some were still adventuring in the secret realms. Yi Chen didn't need to worry about this. Staying in the human territory meant that they were destined to become hunting targets. Racial wars had always been this cruel. The 3 major life starfields began to send people to the Black Tortoise starfield. Every day, there were hundreds of millions of people heading over. A new place contained a new order. This was the best time to develop their forces. The Yi family and the Fallout Sword sect also sent a large number of people to the Black Tortoise starfield. As Yi Chen's status rose, the Yi family and the Fallout Sword sect developed rapidly. Their population grew rapidly as well. In a situation where there were too many monks and not enough gruel, the Yi family and the Fallout Sword sect naturally needed to occupy more space to give their core members a chance to display their abilities. Regarding these things, Yi Chen didn't care, and he didn't want to care. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed since Yi Chen's return. Xu Jing and Murong Qingcheng were both at the peak of 8th layer life and death realm, only a step away from becoming supremes. However, this step had stumped countless geniuses. Yi Chen had no way to help them become supremes. They could only rely on themselves. Fortunately, with their talents, becoming supremes was only a matter of time. There was no need to rush. 9 Suns Heavenly Sovereign had been released 90 years ago. On this day, Yi Chen also released Supreme Skyhook. Supreme Skyhook, we're both supremes of the human race. If you're not convinced, feel free to come at me. I, Yi Chen, will take them all on. I hope you know what to do. Before releasing Supreme Skyhook, Yi Chen left a few words for him. Soon, another 100 years passed. On this day, in a certain part of the starry sky, a bright sword light illuminated millions of light years. Sword Saint White Pole had come out of seclusion. The Supremes of the Human Race Alliance promptly went to congratulate him. Yi Chen was no exception. Chapter 1404. The White Pole Sword Sage was a refined middle-aged man dressed in white. Only Yi Chen could vaguely tell how strong the sword chi on his body was. He had already fused his sword chi with his aura. After being nurtured by his aura, his sword chi was no longer as hard and sharp as before. His aura had also been tempered by the sword chi and appeared to be purer, without any impurities. As such, the White Pole Sword Sage did not look like a swordsman but more like a scholar with a pure aura. However, if anyone dared to underestimate the White Pole Sword Sage, they would regret being born in this world. The place where the White Pole Sword Saint had secluded himself was an ordinary planet. When he came out of seclusion, the planet turned into dust with a poof. After so many years, the planet had long been corroded into sand by the White Pole Sword Saint's sword chi. With a wave of his hand, the yellow sand gathered in the White Pole Sword Sage's hand and turned into a khaki-colored sword. Seeing this scene, everyone could not help but gasp. The weight of a planet was actually compressed into a sword by the White Pole Sword Sage. This had destroyed the balance of the universe. The one who felt it the most was naturally Yi Chen. There were strong and weak demigods. From Yi Chen's point of view, the White Pole Sword Sage had clearly not reached the stage of condensing god power and probably had not comprehended the power of laws. Even so, to compress a planet's mass of sand into a sword was enough to leave any legendary supremacy in the dust. "Welcome, Lord Sword Sage." Everyone cheered in unison. The White Pole Sword Sage walked over with a smile. "Thank you." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Chen, whom he had never met before, and said with a smile, "You must be the legendary Yi Chen. Hearing about you is not as good as meeting you in person. The last time they spoke of you, you were only a super supremacy. Now, you are already a legendary supremacy. Lord Sword Sage is too kind. Yi Chen is just a little lucky. At our level, who doesn't understand that luck is for those who are prepared?" It was obvious that the White Pole Sword Sage thought very highly of Yi Chen. Heavenly Venerate 9 Yang and Supremacy Skyhook looked uncertain. They seemed to want to say something, but they swallowed their words. Sword Sage White Pole glanced at Heavenly Venerate 9 Sun and Supremacy Skyhook and suddenly said, "Don't think that I don't know anything just because I was in seclusion. I know exactly what you have done. I just wanted to see what your bottom line is. Unfortunately, you have disappointed me." Sword Saint Bai Ji's words shocked everyone. It turned out that everything was under the White Pole Sword Saint's control. That made sense. They were really stupid. Although a demigod was not a true god, since he was a demigod, he definitely had extraordinary means and abilities. It was not something that they could speculate about. Heavenly Venerate 9 Sun and Supremacy Skyhook turned pale. Lord Sword Sage, 9 Suns knows his mistake. Heavenly Venerate 9 Sun hurriedly admitted his mistake. Originally, he still had some complaints about Yi Chen. Now, he no longer had any complaints. He wished that Yi Chen could imprison him for a few more days, as long as Sword Sage Whitepole did not have any prejudice against him. "Lord Sword Sage, everything is my fault. I am willing to accept my punishment." Supremacy Skyhook was also very straightforward. At this moment, if he did not know when to back down, he would really be asking for it. With a light snort, White Extreme Sword Saint said, "Since Supreme Yi Chen has already imprisoned you, I won't act in your stead any longer. You'd better behave yourselves. If you offend again in the future, you'll be punished twice. Lord Sword Sage, don't worry. I will not do it again in the future." Both of them heaved a sigh of relief. They still had lingering fears. All right, you can go back. Yi Chen, you stay. Sword Sage White Pole left Yi Chen behind and let the others leave first. Soon, only Sword Sage White Pole and Yi Chen were left in the cosmos. Sword Sage White Pole waved the earth-yellow sword in his hand and said to Yi Chen, do you know what the levels of a demigod are? No. Yi Chen shook his head. When a silver martial Parthuan spirit transforms into a gold martial Parthuan spirit, one becomes a demigod. According to the level of the gold martial Parthuan spirit, the demigods are divided into beginner, intermediate, high, peak, and so on. I am just a beginner demigod, and so is Demon Sage Gallows. Isn't that a little surprising? Sword Sage White Pole said with a smile. A little. Sword Sage White Pole and Demon Sage Gallows had been imprisoned for countless years. Yi Chen had thought that the two of them were already not weak among the demigods. Sword Sage White Pole continued, the Gold Martial Parthuan Spirit is also known as the Eternal Martial Parthuan Spirit. Once it reaches the perfect level, it can exist for eternity. It is close to or equivalent to a true god. Therefore, every increase in the Gold Martial Parthuan Spirit is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It is harder and harder to become a demigod. If nothing goes wrong, I will stop at the beginner demigod level for the rest of my life. Who can predict what will happen in the future? Yi Chen said. Perhaps, but not everyone can become a supporting character or even a main character. Raising his head to look at the starry sky, Sword Sage White Pole said, do you know how the Black Wind Stream and the Mora Death Prison were formed? Yi Chen raised his eyebrows and listened quietly. The Black Wind Stream and the Mora Death Prison were created by the will of the universe. Every million years, as long as one's martial Parthuan spirit reaches the bronze level, they will be imprisoned in these two prisons. Only those whose martial Parthuan spirit has not reached the bronze level are spared. Demigods are no exception. If they do not want to be imprisoned, the only way is to leave the universe within a million years. This is also why the demigods in history only appear briefly before disappearing. It is because they have all left this universe. Sword Sage White Pole revealed an earth-shattering secret. Hearing this, Yi Chen was very surprised. The Black Wind Stream and the Mora Death Prison were actually created by the will of the universe. If Sword Sage White Pole had not told him, he would not have known at all. Now that he thought about it, everything was quite reasonable. The will of the universe created these two prisons and handed them over to the human race and the demons respectively. After countless years, the origins of these two prisons gradually became unknown. A million years was enough for the Human Race Alliance and the Demons Alliance to give birth to new supremes. Other than that, this also explained why the seals of the Black Wind Stream and the Mora Death Prison were automatically opened. Of course, apart from most of them being imprisoned by the will of the universe, there were also many who were imprisoned artificially. After all, the Black Wind Stream and the Mora Death Prison were controlled by the human race and the demons respectively. Why would the will of the universe do this? Yi Chen asked. Sword Sage White Pole shook his head. I'm not sure either. However, I'm guessing that this should be a measure to protect itself. The universe has a limit. When the number of supremes reaches a certain level, the universe itself will also have to endure a lot of pressure. As for the demigods, they are constantly being suppressed by the will of the universe and are unable to go all out. How many years are left until the million-year deadline? Yi Chen asked again. There are about 120,000 years left. The time for the Black Wind Stream and the Mora Death Prison to open their seals is not fixed. This time, it is slightly earlier. Chapter 1405. 120,000 years. That's not short. Yi Chen was only 1,000 years old. 120,000 years was too long for him. Of course, for those below the level of supremacy, 120,000 years was definitely a lifetime. Sword Saint Bai Ji shook his head. Strictly speaking, it's only 20,000 years. After 20,000 years, those whose martial primordial spirits have reached the bronze level will be sent to the chaos battlefield. There are not only supremacies of our universe there, but also supremacies of other universes. There are 3 outcomes for entering. One is to be killed, one is to survive and be sealed in the Black Wind Stream or the Mora Death Prison, and one is to become a member of the Heavenly Realm. Chaos Battlefield, Heavenly Realm member? This was the first time Yi Chen had heard of these 2 terms. He was very curious. The Chaos Battlefield is connected to many universes. Becoming a member of the Heavenly Realm is the most basic requirement to enter. Legend has it that the Heavenly Realm is a supreme world higher than any other universe. Even true gods go there. No one knew when it started, but the universe could no longer give birth to true gods. To become a true god, one had to go to the Heavenly Realm. Otherwise, although demigods had a long lifespan, they would eventually run out under the pressure of the universe's will. Apart from that, life without opponents was too lonely. Everyone was curious, and curiosity was a powerful source of motivation. Do I have to go to the Chaos Battlefield after 20,000 years? It's not that I have to. Under the pressure of the universe's will, even I can't resist. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been imprisoned in the Mora Death Prison. Sword Saint Bai Ji smiled bitterly. Nodding, Yi Chen suddenly said, Sword Saint Bai Ji, have you heard of the Wilderness God Continent? There were too many supremacies in the Wilderness God Continent. Even all the supremacies in the universe added up couldn't compare to the number of supremacies in one tribe. Wilderness God Continent. You came back from there? No wonder. Sword Saint Bai Ji understood and continued, of course I have. The Wilderness God Continent was created by the oldest true god of our universe, the Wilderness God. It contains the Wilderness God's rules. Even the universes can't interfere with anything on the Wilderness God Continent. Even the universes can't interfere. Yes, there are strong and weak true gods. The Wild's God is one of the most ancient and powerful true gods. His will is on the same level as the will of the universe. However, it is also because of this that the people of the Wild's God Continent are unable to leave the Wild's God Continent. If you stay on the Wild's God Continent for too long, it is very likely that you will be assimilated by the Wild's God Continent, making it difficult for you to leave the Wild's God Continent in the future. The White Pole Sword Sage knew countless times more than Yi Chen. This was something that could not be achieved through talent and comprehension. It could only be achieved through the accumulation of time. Compared to the White Pole Sword Sage, Yi Chen's age was nothing more than the time he spent in seclusion. It was impossible for him to know too much in such a short amount of time. The primal chaos battlefield is extremely dangerous, and there are many demigods there. You should take advantage of the 20,000 years you have left to strengthen yourself. The more you have, the more protection you will have. Sword Saint White Pole said. Yi Chen nodded. 20,000 years might seem like a long time, but at his realm and strength, it was not that easy to improve further. However, as Sword Saint White Pole said, the more you have, the more protection you will have. Within 20,000 years, it was not impossible to improve further, but it would be very difficult. One was a human demigod, and the other was the strongest sovereign of the human race. The two of them chatted as they strolled through the 4 major lifestar regions. Occasionally, they would land on some nameless planet. Sword Saint White Pole, Yi Chen will take his leave first. On a neutron star, the chess game ended, and Yi Chen stood up to bid farewell. All right, let's meet again when we have time in the future. Sword Saint White Pole smiled and stood up. Definitely. Space-time distorted, and Yi Chen disappeared without a trace. The gravity of the neutron star did not bind him at all. What a heaven-defying monster. He has the strength of a peak legendary sovereign when he is only at the beginner legendary sovereign realm. Compared to him, I was only born a few million years earlier. Sword Saint White Pole sighed. When one's martial primordial spirit reached the bronze level, one would be a super sovereign. When it reached the silver level, one would be a legendary sovereign, and when it reached the gold level, one would be a demigod. Legendary sovereigns were divided into 5 cultivation levels according to the strength of the silver martial primordial spirit: beginner legendary sovereign, intermediate legendary sovereign, high legendary sovereign, peak legendary sovereign, and quasi-demigod. Although Yi Chen was a peak legendary sovereign, in terms of cultivation, he was only a beginner legendary sovereign. Under normal circumstances, it was already very good for a beginner legendary sovereign to have the strength of an intermediate legendary sovereign. This meant that he was more outstanding in a certain aspect. For someone like Yi Chen, he had to be outstanding in all aspects. Otherwise, his strength would not be able to cross 3 levels. There were still 20,000 years before they entered the primal chaos battlefield. Sword Saint Whitepole and Demon Saint Galwaz were not in the mood to fight. This made the Human Race Alliance and the Demons Alliance unprecedentedly peaceful. Time flew, and the first 1,000 years had passed. The Human Race Alliance had a new sovereign, lifeless saber sovereign Lung Feifen. Of course, after becoming a sovereign, his title became lifeless saber sovereign. The second 1,000 years had passed, and Yi Chen had pushed his spiritual body to the middle stage of the 9th level. The price he had to pay was a large amount of heavenly and earthly treasures, some from the Milky Way, some from Hell, and some from some unknown secret realms. Collecting heavenly and earthly treasures for 2,000 years to raise my spiritual body from the early stage of the 9th level to the middle stage of the 9th level. It's really difficult. Hell and the Milky Way were filled with endless dangers. Even with Yi Chen's strength, he had to be careful and advance step by step. During this period, he had also encountered water monsters that surpassed the 4th level 3 times and legendary ghost lords 4 times. If not for the protection of the Black Tortoise sacred armor, Yi Chen might not have been able to escape unscathed. The former had the home ground advantage, while the latter was wary of Yi Chen's netherworld sacred eye. However, as the sovereign of Hell, the Ghost Lords had a very close relationship with Hell. They were equivalent to a part of Hell. This caused Yi Chen's netherworld sacred eye to not be able to completely suppress the Ghost Lords. At most, it could slightly suppress the other party's hellish will. As the number of times he entered and exited the Milky Way and Hell increased, Yi Chen gradually understood some things about the Milky Way and Hell. The Milky Way was a link to Hell. Without this link, even demigods could not enter Hell. Some of the Ghost Lords in Hell were actually sovereigns of the universe. There was also a Phoenix Ghost Sage, who was once one of the ancestors of the Phoenix race and had the purest Phoenix blood. Although he had the Netherworld Sacred Eye and was not suppressed in Hell, and instead enjoyed many benefits, Yi Chen did not dare to be too reckless. He felt that the forces in Hell were much stronger than those in the universe. Even the Wild's continent could not compare to it. If not for the fact that the ghosts and ghost lords in Hell could not leave Hell, just like the Wild's continent, who knew what the universe would be like. And in Hell, Yi Chen accidentally heard news about the first demon lord with the bloodline of the great demon king. He had a good relationship with a ghost sage in Hell, heaven-slaughtering ghost sage. Chapter 1406. My father is imprisoned in Hell. Hearing Yi Chen's words, Xu Jing was extremely shocked. Before the Morrow Death Prison and Black Windstream seals were opened, she thought that her father would be imprisoned in the Morrow Death Prison. However, after the prison was opened, there were no gold Supreme Warriors among the Supreme Warriors, which made her very disappointed. Now that Yi Chen had told her about her father, she was astonished, but at the same time, her heart was filled with boundless expectation. She, who had reached the peak of the 8th sky of life and death realm, had already recovered her lost memories. She could clearly remember everything that had happened before she was 10 years old. However, what made her feel strange was that her mother's image was always that of a black shadow. She didn't know whether it was because her memory was incomplete or not. Whether he is imprisoned in Hell or not, I'm not completely sure. But from the rumors, there is indeed a supreme level gold dragon imprisoned in the Yin Dragon Mountain. Before becoming a supreme warrior, Yi Chen couldn't contact the upper echelons of Hell at all. After becoming a supreme warrior, especially the number 1 supreme warrior in the universe, he also had some connections in Hell. After all, he was not completely unrelated to Hell. The appearance of the Netherworld Sacred Eye proved that he was favored by Hell. Of course, he was not the only one who was favored. Perhaps, with the Netherworld Sacred Eye, the bloodline of the Great Demon King seemed to be favored even more. Perhaps, the bloodline of the Great Demon King had some deep relationship with Hell. Then what do you plan to do? Xu Jing naturally knew that hell was extremely dangerous. Even demigods wouldn't dare to act recklessly there. Yi Chen said, "Don't worry, I will save your father. But, I will need your essence blood to refine a sensing compass to sense the Yin Dragon Mountain and your father's location." The Yin Dragon Mountain was an ancient mountain that existed in the depths of hell's spacetime. Its location was unknown. Even if Yi Chen's spacetime profound was completed and he had the Netherworld Sacred Eye, he still wouldn't be able to find it without knowing its location. Unless he went to ask the ancient ghost kings of hell, but those old guys were too dangerous. Yi Chen didn't want to look for trouble. No problem. Xu Jing nodded. A year later, Yi Chen used Xu Jing's essence blood and other precious materials to refine a golden sensory compass. There were different grades of sensory compasses. Yi Chen had refined an Emperor Grade 1, while the highest grade was Supreme. Once again, Yi Chen came to the infernal realm and took out the golden compass. After injecting the sword origin into it, the needle spun crazily before finally pointing to the east. Putting away the compass, Yi Chen flew toward the east. Along the way, Yi Chen took out the golden compass several times and pointed it to the east every time. 2 years passed. The feeling is getting stronger and stronger. We're almost there. In the past, the needle would spin many times before pointing to the east. Recently, the needle would spin 1 or 2 times before returning to normal. Another 3 months passed, and the needle pointed to the west, which meant that Yi Chen had passed his destination. Going back a little, the needle began to spin infinitely. It's here. Yi Chen looked around and realized that this place was surrounded by mountains, with only a plain in the middle. It was not normal at all. According to the terrain, there should be a huge mountain in the middle of the mountains, which should be the leader of the mountains. Activating the Netherworld Sacred Eye, Yi Chen's vision could see through the endless spacetime. Soon, he found a huge ancient mountain in the depths of the spacetime. It was really bigger than a life planet. Locking on to this ancient mountain, Yi Chen's figure spread out and entered the depths of the spacetime. Swish. After a while, Yi Chen arrived at the foot of the ancient mountain. This mountain was undulating, like a trapped old dragon, which was quite ominous. There was a ghost temple on the mountainside, which was full of ghostly shadows, which made people feel uneasy. "Uncle, I hope we are fated to meet in the Yin Dragon Mountain. Otherwise, there won't be a chance." After another 18,000 years, Yi Chen would definitely enter the primal chaos battlefield. This time, he finally found some clues. If not, Yi Chen really didn't know where to find the Golden Supremes. Just as he was about to go up the mountain, the ghost temple on the mountain suddenly erupted with yin energy. 2 10,000 Zhongtall ghost kings with green faces and fangs jumped out. "How dare you! Yin Dragon Mountain is an important place in hell. Leave quickly. Human beings also dare to come to Yin Dragon Mountain. I think it's better not to leave." Their voices were like rolling thunder, reverberating in the sky above Yi Chen. "You 2 little devils, you don't even have a little bit of eyesight. Serves you right to guard this mountain." Yi Chen blew out a breath, and a black gale rolled out, blowing the 2 ghost monarchs into a sorry state. If it was an ordinary supremes here, even if their cultivation was 1 level higher than the ghost kings, they still wouldn't be able to contend against them. The main reason was that the ghosts and ghost kings in hell were useless against them. Only soul attacks or willpower attacks could hurt them. These 2 attacks were only supplementary methods, so how could they be the trump cards of the Supremes? Yi Chen had the Netherworld Sacred Eye, so his attacks contained the willpower of hell. To him, there was no difference between being in hell and outside. He could use his full strength. "Who are you? Do you think you can run amok in hell just because you have some tricks up your sleeve?" At this time, a ghostly big hand flew out of the ghost temple and grabbed towards Yi Chen. "I am Green Lotus Sword, Venerable Yi Chen. Who are you in hell?" The heavenly sword was unsheathed, and Yi Chen slashed the ghost hand in half. "I am the 3 Yin Ghost King. I am ordered to guard Yin Dragon Mountain. I advise you to leave quickly. My master is not someone you can mess with." A pale middle-aged man with an ancient face walked out of the ghost temple and said in a loud voice. Yi Chen said, "Dare I ask, is the one imprisoned in Yin Dragon Mountain the supremes of the dragon tribe?" The 3 Yin Ghost King said, "Yin Dragon Mountain imprisons countless prisoners. I can't even recognize all the ancient ones. How would I know who you are talking about? He hasn't been imprisoned for long. Maybe a few thousand to 10,000 years. Oh, let me see." The 3 Yin Ghost King took out a book and flipped through it. Soon, he stopped. There is indeed a supremes of the dragon tribe imprisoned 9,000 years ago. Unfortunately, he will be imprisoned for 1,000,000 years. Not even 10,000 years have passed. You should leave and come back after 990,000 years. Putting away the book, the 3 Yin Ghost King warned. Imprisoned for 1,000,000 years? Sorry, I can't wait that long. May I ask, why is he imprisoned in Yin Dragon Mountain? Do we have to be imprisoned when we come to hell? Yi Chen questioned. Of course not. He violated the taboo of Lord 9 Yin. That is why he is imprisoned. What taboo? After his beloved wife died, she became Hell's ghostly lord, Red Lotus ghostly lord. I don't know where he got the news, but he came to Hell to take Red Lotus ghostly lord away. Unfortunately, once he becomes a ghostly lord, all memories of his past life are gone. It is a new beginning. Red Lotus ghostly lord naturally refused to go with him. Lord 9 Yin could not bear it and imprisoned him in Yin Dragon Mountain. Chapter 1407. After becoming a ghostly lord, his memories would be wiped clean. A new beginning. Yi Chen frowned and asked, "Can people go to hell after they die?" However, the moment they arrive in hell, they are no longer their original selves, but a new life. The difference is that according to their cultivation base, their strength in hell after death is also different. When an ordinary person dies in hell, they are merely a ball of chilly wind, which can easily dissipate. The stronger ones are a ball of fire, and the stronger ones can become ghosts, such as impermanence ghosts, nether ghosts, yellow springs ghosts, and so on. As for supremes, they might not necessarily become ghost monarchs. Perhaps they really die, and only a few supremes can become ghost monarchs, beginning their second life. Yi Chen glanced at Yi Chen. Indeed, after death, any life form will enter hell. But, the moment they enter hell, they will no longer be their original self. The 3 Dark Ghostly Lord had explained so much because he felt that Yi Chen was not someone to be trifled with. Since he could find Yin Dragon Mountain, he must be a heaven-defying sovereign. Who is your lord? Is it the 9 Yin Ghostly Sage? Yi Chen guessed. As Yi Chen had expected, the 3 Dark Ghostly Lord said, "My lord is one of the 10 sages of hell, the 9 Yin Ghostly Sage. I advise you to leave quickly, lest you seek trouble." It really is the 9 Yin Ghostly Sage. There were 10 ghostly sages in hell. Of these 10 ghostly sages, 5 were transformed from demigods in the human world, while the other 5 were ghostly sages born in hell itself. They had nothing to do with the human world. Naturally, these 5 ghostly sages were exceptionally strong, much stronger than those transformed from demigods. The 9 Yin Ghostly Sage was one of them. With a smile, Yi Chen suddenly said, "You've told me so much. I'm guessing that your lord is not in his territory." The 3 Dark Ghostly Lords' expression changed. "What do you want?" "Nothing much. I just want you to release that dragon supremacy. I can guarantee that he will not disturb your lord in the future." Yi Chen had made up his mind. Even if it meant offending the 9 Yin Ghostly Sage, he would rescue the golden supremacy. "You dare." The 3 Dark Ghostly Lord was enraged. He had said so much to Yi Chen, not wanting him to cause trouble. Otherwise, if the 9 Yin Ghostly Sage returned, he would be in trouble. "Pardon me." Yi Chen had already seen the golden supreme martial artist through the protective formation. He was mining. The currency in the infernal realm was ghost stones, which were much more precious than primordial stones. Every Yin mountain contained a certain amount of ghost stones. Obviously, Yin Dragon Mountain was both a prison and a mine. Imprisoning criminals and mining ghost stones was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Boom! Yi Chen's sword slashed at the mountain guarding Grand Array. Heaven and earth shook, and the chilly wind roared. Countless ferocious-looking evil spirits were faintly discernible, as if they would pounce out at any time. What a powerful soul attack. When he attacked the mountain-protecting Great Array, a terrifying soul attack fell on Yi Chen's Sea of Soul. If it was an ordinary legend rank sovereign attacking this mountain-protecting Great Array, 8 or 9 out of 10 would be hit. If it was light, their soul would be seriously injured. If it was heavy, their soul would be obliterated. Yi Chen was only able to resist because his soul was exceptionally strong and he had the Netherworld Sacred Eye. Looks like I have to use the Firmament Sword. Sheathing the heavenly sword, Yi Chen pulled out the Firmament Sword. The Firmament Sword was a 3-star heavenly sacred weapon. Once it was unsheathed, the peerless sword chi immediately surged, with an earth-shattering aura. Heavy sword style. With the Firmament Sword in hand, Yi Chen's sword slashed at the Yin Dragon Mountain Guarding Grand Array. Seeing that the Mountain Guarding Grand Array was about to be split open, a huge face suddenly appeared on the Mountain Guarding Grand Array. How dare you attack the array that I personally set up? 9 Yin Ghostly Sage. Yi Chen was shocked. Without another word, he immediately tore apart space and time, wanting to leave hell. He did not expect that the 9 Yin Ghostly Sage would integrate a portion of his own power into the Mountain Guarding Grand Array. Once the Mountain Guarding Grand Array could not hold on any longer, this power would transform into the 9 Yin Ghostly Sage. Trying to escape, the 9 Yin Ghostly Sage laughed coldly. His hand grabbed out, and the entire sky and earth were covered in darkness. Heaven and earth roam. In these 2,000 years, Yi Chen had not wasted his time. Besides raising his spirit body from the early level 9 to the middle level 9, Yi Chen had also created a space-time movement technique, Heaven and Earth Roam. Shua, shua, shua. The space-time in hell twisted endlessly. Even the darkness was warped, and a faint sliver of light leaked out. Following the light, Yi Chen's figure swept out, rushing out of the 9 Yin Ghostly Sage's area of control. The 9 Yin Ghostly Sage laughed coldly. With a flick of his left hand, a white light chased after Yi Chen. The white light was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, it was behind Yi Chen. Yi Chen once again used his space-time movement technique, Heaven and Earth Roam. His figure was like a fish shuttling through space and time, incomparably slippery. But the white light was like a maggot in his bones, and he could not shake it off. Once my bone-piercing nail appears, it will definitely nail your primordial spirit. The 9 Yin Ghostly Sage was very confident in his methods. In the entire hell, or even the outside world, no one could dodge his bone-piercing nail except for ghostly sages and demigods. Yi Chen naturally did not know what technique this white light was. He only knew that if he was hit by the white light, he would most likely be in trouble. The only way out was to disperse the white light. Under normal circumstances, he could not do that. At this moment, even if the 9 Yin Ghostly Sage was just a phantom, he was still not someone he could deal with. However, he had the Firmament Sword, a 3-star heavenly sacred treasure. Although he could not fully utilize the power of the Firmament Sword, it was also impossible for others to destroy the Firmament Sword. If he used the Firmament Sword to block the white light, he would definitely be able to bring out the true power of the Firmament Sword. Without much hesitation, Yi Chen turned and slashed at the white light. In that instant, Yi Chen and the white light froze. In the next instant, the white light twisted and dissipated. And Yi Chen was also sent flying. Along the way, space-time distorted, and his entire person disappeared without a trace. Heavenly sacred treasure. The 9 Yin Ghostly Sage's expression was ugly. Heavenly sacred treasures contained unimaginable power. Forcefully attacking a heavenly sacred treasure would only cause the heavenly sacred treasure to retaliate. The next time you come to hell, I will definitely catch you. The huge face blurred and gradually disappeared. From the depths of the Sky River, a figure shot out. It was Yi Chen. After becoming a paragon, Yi Chen did not need to enter hell through any special entrance. He only needed to dive deep into the Sky River and break through the barrier to enter hell. Of course, this way, he would not be able to determine where he would enter hell. He would appear at random places. That was close. Is this the power of a ghostly sage? Yi Chen had never fought with a demigod or ghostly sage before. This was the first time. Facing the phantom of the nine-yin ghostly sage, Yi Chen felt as if his soul had been blinded. If not for the spacetime movement technique, heaven and earth roam, which contained the charm of turning the impossible into the possible, Yi Chen would not have had the slightest chance of escaping the other party's control. It will be difficult to enter hell next time. Yi Chen smiled bitterly and shook his head. It was not a good thing to be remembered by a ghostly sage. Originally, he could have collected some treasures unique to hell. But now, forget it. He would think about it later. Chapter 1408. For the next 1,000 years, Yi Chen didn't step into hell. He was waiting for the three-sword intents to advance to the 9th level. At that time, his strength would increase by leaps and bounds. He might not be able to fight against a demigod, but a demigod wouldn't be able to kill him easily. This wait lasted for another 500 years. On this day, in the sky above the 9 revolution star, Sword Chi soared into the sky, and the three-sword intents appeared. They were the immortal and indestructible white immortal sword intent, the destructive black destruction sword intent, and the radiant sword intent that radiated boundless light. As soon as the three-sword intents appeared, the surrounding dozens to hundreds of light-years fell into an extreme silence. For a moment, no one could even feel the existence of the laws of the heavenly Tao. What a terrifying sword intent! All the Supremes looked at the Tianchen continent where Yi Chen was. 9th level sword intent. Heavenly Sovereign Zhuyang's eyes widened. After becoming a supremacy, everyone's martial intent would be stuck at the peak of the 8th level. Only after becoming a demigod would they be able to raise their martial intent to the 9th level. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that a 9th level spirit body and 9th level domain couldn't compare to a 9th level martial intent. If the spirit body was like a home, the 9th level domain was like a border defense, and the martial intent was like a commander, like a king that controlled everything. 3 9th level sword intents. How is this possible? Supreme Skyhook was so shocked that he almost bit his tongue. He had never been so shocked in his life. At this moment, all the Supremes finally understood how terrifying Yi Chen was. Possessing one supreme sword intent was already enough to make him a genius among geniuses, but Yi Chen had 3 immortal, destruction, and radiant. With 3 supreme sword intents gathered in one body, who in the same generation could compete with him? Unprecedented since ancient times. Sword Saint Bai Ji let out a deep breath. Even if Yi Chen's sword intent had reached the 9th level, it wouldn't be able to compete with him. His sword intent had already reached the mid-stage of the 9th level, but it wasn't a supreme sword intent. Instead, it was an extreme sword intent that was equivalent to the slaughter sword intent. This is rank 9 sword intent. As his sword intent had just broken through, Yi Chen was still unable to fully control it. Strands of sword intent spread out. There was the immortal sword intent, the destruction sword intent, and the light sword intent. The 3 great sword intents didn't interfere with each other. Wherever the sword intent went, a large amount of soil would turn into earth and yellow swords, a large amount of air would condense together, turning into swords of air, and a large amount of light would condense into swords of light. In this world, as long as anything came into contact with Yi Chen's sword intent, it would all be turned into swords, and Yi Chen didn't even have to think about it. I see. Yi Chen finally understood how Sword Saint Bai Ji had managed to turn a planet into a sword. It was the effect of sword intent. Above the 9th level was the true God will and the universe will. True God will and the universe will were omnipotent. Although the 9th level was far from it, it still had unfathomable abilities. Gradually, the scattered sword intent was retracted. In Yi Chen's soul ocean, the 3 great sword souls were lined up side by side. The destruction sword soul was so black that it didn't have any form. The immortal sword soul was like a white crystal that would last forever. The light sword soul was a sword soul formed from endless light, billions of times more dazzling than the sun. The light it emitted didn't have any impurities, and was pure and dreamy. Hm. The sword intent is tempering the soul. Suddenly, Yi Chen discovered a shocking scene. In his soul ocean, The immortal sword intent first shone with a white light, sweeping through the soul ocean again and again. As the immortal sword intent swept through, Yi Chen found that the purity of his soul ocean was getting higher and higher. It was like a liquid made of melted crystal. 1 month passed, and the strength of Yi Chen's soul had increased by more than 100 times. It was like he had eaten a great tonic. In the 2nd month, the destruction sword intent continued to sweep through the soul ocean. If the immortal sword intent was said to be increasing the soul's strength, then the destruction sword intent was said to be clearing out the impurities in the soul. If the impurities merged with the soul, then the destruction sword intent would directly destroy a small part of the soul, as if it was removing a tumor. Finally, it was the light sword intent's turn to sweep through the soul ocean. The light sword intent was the most gentle. When the light sword intent swept through, the soul ocean seemed to be bathed in sunlight, becoming lively and active. 1 year passed, and Yi Chen's soul ocean turned from silver to gold. If the gold Yuan spirit was equivalent to the eternal Yuan spirit, then the gold soul could also be called the eternal soul. This was the soul that only demigods had, and ordinary beginner demigods might not even be as pure as Yi Chen's soul. With the current strength of my soul, I'm afraid even a demigod wouldn't be able to kill me with his soul. After becoming an honorable, soul attacks and will attacks were usually supplementary. In a battle of the same level, soul attacks and will attacks could at most affect the opponent. It was basically impossible to destroy the opponent's soul. However, existences 1 level higher would be able to destroy the opponent's soul. The most frightening thing was that after one's will reached the 9th level, the combination of soul attacks and will attacks was incomparably terrifying. It was equivalent to a double attack, and it was impossible to defend against it. Back in Hell, when Yi Chen attacked the Yin Dragon Mountain's protective array, he was attacked with the will of the 9 Yin ghostly sage. If not for the fact that it was not the 9 Yin ghostly sage's true body and that Yi Chen had the netherworld divine eye, perhaps Yi Chen's soul would have been destroyed and he would have died on the spot. It was fine if one's soul attacks and will attacks were not strong, but one's soul defense must be strong. Any weakness could bring about a fatal disaster. Golden soul, such a clear mind. In an instant, countless sparks flashed above Yi Chen's sea of soul. These were intelligent electric currents, sparks of thoughts. The stronger the sparks of wisdom, the stronger the calculation and comprehension ability. The golden soul gave Yi Chen the comprehension and learning ability of a demigod. It was not as simple as strengthening his soul. The heavens are really helping me, Yi Chen couldn't help but shout. Originally, he was a little depressed. He clearly knew where the golden supremacy was, but he couldn't save him. Seeing that the deadline to enter the primal chaos battlefield was approaching, Yi Chen was actually very anxious. Now, all the problems were easily solved. Given a period of time, Yi Chen was confident that he could raise his strength to a new level. At that time, together with the 3-star heavenly sacred treasure, the firmament sword, he should be able to fight against the 9 Yin ghostly sage. Another 1,500 years passed. There were still 15,000 years until the primal chaos battlefield. Based on the netherworld divine eye, Yi Chen created a secret technique that attacked the soul and will, the Sword of Hell. The Sword of Hell contained a soul attack and will attack. The will attack was divided into 2 parts. One was the destructive sword will, and the other was the will of hell. When the 3 were combined, the killing power was abnormally shocking. It was not an exaggeration to say that no one below the demigod level could block the Sword of Hell, unless the opponent's soul was a golden soul. Update tomorrow. My nephew is going overseas. He went to Nantong for 3 days and just returned. Update tomorrow. Sorry. Chapter 1409. Without any hesitation, Yi Chen entered Hell once again. The reason why he dared to enter Hell was not because he had the confidence to fight against the 9 Yin ghostly sage. That was basically impossible. The 9 Yin ghostly sage was much stronger than the average ghostly sage, and was born and bred in Hell. Even though Yi Chen's sword will and soul had improved by leaps and bounds, he was still no match for the 9 Yin ghostly sage. He was only confident that he could escape from the 9 Yin ghostly sage. The The golden soul allowed him to better utilize the mysteries of spacetime ultimacy, and the 3 Tier 9 sword wills increased his survivability. As for the Sword of Hell, it was his trump card. It was the only trump card that could threaten demigods or ghostly sages. Yi Chen's luck was not bad. The 9-yin ghostly sage had not returned yet. Perhaps he did not think that Yi Chen would dare to enter hell again, and was in no hurry to return. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Sword Venerable Green Lotus, you are courting death. The 3-yin ghostly lord looked at Yi Chen in disbelief. He knew that the Yin Dragon Mountain was protected by the power of the 9-yin ghostly lord, and still dared to come again. He was crazy and reckless. 3-yin ghostly lord, we meet again. Activating the underworld divine eye, Yi Chen saw that the golden supremacy was still in Yin Dragon Mountain. He heaved a sigh of relief and greeted him. Sword Venerable Green Lotus, let's see how you escape from hell this time. The 3-yin ghostly lord did not come out, but stayed in the ghostly temple. After rescuing the golden supremacy, I will naturally leave hell. Open. Unsheathing the firmament sword, Yi Chen slashed at the Yin Dragon Mountain with a heavy sword style. The heavy sword light was like a divine light that could split the heavens and earth, unstoppable and unstoppable. Rumble. The protective array of Yin Dragon Mountain shook violently, and then a giant face appeared. The giant face was filled with rage. Since you are here, don't leave. 2 gloomy rays of light shot out from the eyes of the giant face and shot towards Yi Chen. How could Yi Chen not see that this eerie light was condensed from the power of ghosts? Ghosts were the product of the soul and the will of hell. They were formless and incorporeal. They were more mysterious and stronger than soul power. Ordinary attacks were unable to injure ghosts, just like how ordinary attacks were unable to injure souls. Below the ghost monarch rank, all ghosts were condensed from the power of ghosts. They had form but no substance. After becoming a ghost monarch, they would begin to condense a ghost body, which was equivalent to the body of a life form in the outside world. However, the ghost body was actually a variation of the power of ghosts. The eerie light flashed and disappeared into Yi Chen's soul sea. In that instant, tens of thousands of ghosts howled above Yi Chen's soul sea. If it were an ordinary supremacy, his soul sea would definitely be devoured cleanly, leaving nothing behind. But Yi Chen was no ordinary supremacy. The golden soul sea rippled, and the thousands of ghosts found it difficult to swallow. At the same time, the 3 sword spirits were enraged, releasing a terrifying storm of sword will that swept towards the thousands of ghosts. Like spring snow meeting the blazing sun, the thousands of ghosts melted away. Under the assault of the 3 great sword wills, the ghost power of the ghostly sage could not hold out for long. What? Golden Soul, 9th tier sword will? Because he had not paid enough attention to Yi Chen, the ghost power that the 9-yin ghostly sage had released contained a sliver of consciousness. As the ghost power was melted away, this sliver of consciousness also collapsed, blurring the giant face. But it also let him know the changes in Yi Chen's soul sea. The ghost power could not do anything to Yi Chen. The giant face on the protective array broke away, taking on the appearance of the 9-yin ghostly sage. Very good. No wonder you dare to step into hell again. The 9-yin ghost sage was a skinny, cold-looking middle-aged man. He wore a black cloak, which did not have a specific shape. It looked like black ink that stretched out endlessly. However, Yi Chen, who had the underworld saint eye, squinted his eyes. From this black cloak, he could feel a trace of fear. This feeling was like seeing a sky saint weapon. If Yi Chen had guessed correctly, the black cloak should be a heavenly ghost treasure. Of course, it was not the real body. The real body was definitely with the 9-yin ghostly sage, and the 9-yin ghostly sage and the black cloak were both illusions. 9-yin ghostly sage, I have no intention of becoming enemies with you. I only hope that you can release the golden supremacy of Yin Dragon Mountain. He is no threat to you. Releasing him should not affect you. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yi Chen did not wish to become enemies with the 9-yin ghostly sage. Sword Sage Baiji and Demon Sage Jaluor would not be willing to offend the 9-yin ghostly sage either. Before he became a demigod, or before he could match a demigod, He did not have the right to go against the 9-yin ghostly sage. I will naturally release him after 1,000,000 years. You don't have to worry about that. What you should worry about is how you will escape from hell. The 9-yin ghostly sage stared coldly at Yi Chen. Pardon me. Against the 9-yin ghostly sage's real body, Yi Chen did not have much confidence. Against the 9-yin ghostly sage's illusions, Yi Chen still had some confidence. The Hell Sword was not just for show. Wielding the firmament sword, Yi Chen used the black hole stance to kill the 9-yin ghostly sage. His space-time ultimacy was perfected, and the black hole stance's power was not inferior to the heavy sword stance. The 9-yin ghostly sage laughed coldly. He grabbed with his hand, and the black hole stance shattered. The 9 black holes dissipated before they could form. A ghostly lord had the power of a ghostly lord, and a ghostly sage had the power of a ghostly sage. Whether it was the power of a ghostly lord or the power of a ghostly sage, they were both a combination of the power of a ghostly spirit and the power of a ghostly body. Go! After breaking Yi Chen's sword technique with one move, the 9-yin ghostly sage waved his right hand, and a large amount of white light shot towards Yi Chen. Bone-piercing nail, one of the 9-yin ghostly sage's ultimate moves. Ding 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 ding. There were too many bone-piercing spikes, and Yi Chen could not completely seal them all. After all, to seal the bone-piercing spikes, the real body of the firmament sword had to be used. The illusions formed by the firmament sword could not block the bone-piercing spikes at all. They could only block 1% of the bone-piercing spikes. The remaining bone-piercing spikes all landed on Yi Chen's body. However, to everyone's surprise, the power of the bone-piercing spikes did not penetrate Yi Chen's body. Besides his Tier 9 sword will, the Golden Soul, and the Hell Sword, Yi Chen dared to come to hell. He also had something to rely on, his Immortal sword body. The Immortal sword will had broken through to the Tier 9 level, and Yi Chen's Immortal sword body had reached the 16th level. It was enough to block an attack from a quasi-demigod. Coupled with the Black Tortoise sacred armor, even a beginner demigod could not do anything to Yi Chen. The 9-yin ghostly sage before him was just an illusion, and naturally could not break through Yi Chen's defenses and directly attack Yi Chen's martial Dao primordial spirit. What a surprise, to combine a Tier 9 Immortal sword will with a body refining technique. The 9-yin ghostly sage was surprised once again. The bone-piercing spikes were specialized in attacking one's primordial spirit, and to a certain extent, could ignore defenses. However, this was only to a certain extent. Yi Chen's Immortal sword body contained the Tier 9 Immortal sword will, and with the protection of the Immortal sword will, it was extremely difficult for the bone-piercing spikes to penetrate his defenses. It could be said that Yi Chen's Immortal sword body was almost flawless. It could block normal attacks, and it could also block attacks from nothingness. However, this was also because Yi Chen had the Immortal sword will, and other sword wills could not do the job. Chapter 14:10. Yellow Spring's Finger. As one of the 10 sages of hell, the 9-yin ghostly sage had many tricks up his sleeves. The bone-piercing nail was only one of his ultimate moves. In comparison, the Yellow Spring's Finger was even more overbearing and unstoppable. He raised his right index finger, and a dark, cold light gathered. The air was visibly frozen, and the cold air exploded, spreading towards Yi Chen. The power of the 9 underworld frost. Yi Chen was shocked. The 9 underworld frost and hellish fire were the most terrifying things in hell. Both were split into 9 grades, and anyone who could refine a high-grade 9 underworld frost or hellish fire could use it as their trump card. From this unique cold air, the 9-yin ghostly sage's Yellow Spring's Finger had clearly refined a high-grade 9 underworld frost. The cold air grew endlessly in his body, forming a source. Combined with the 9-yin ghostly sage's ghostly sage power, it was unimaginably terrifying. Not daring to let the Yellow Spring's Finger touch his body directly, Yi Chen roared, activating the true defensive power of the Xian Wu divine armor. Dark underworld sky. A phantom of a Xian Wu formed, enveloping Yi Chen. In the next instant, the Yellow Spring's Finger landed on it, freezing the phantom of the Xian Wu into a block of ice. However, Yi Chen was not affected. A heavenly sage treasure armor? The 9-yin ghostly sage frowned. It was already extremely lucky for a legendary figure to have a heavenly sage treasure. This kid actually had two, one for offense and one for defense. It was perfect. Forget it, I'll take him down first. Although he could not hurt Yi Chen, it did not mean that the 9-yin ghostly sage could not capture Yi Chen. The two were not the same. Heaven and earth shrouding. 9-yin ghostly hand. The 9-yin ghostly sage soared into the sky, the cloak on his back expanding into a sky full of black clouds. Before Yi Chen could react, he had been enveloped. Although this cloak was only a phantom of a heavenly ghost treasure, it was activated by the 9-yin ghostly sage's ghostly sage power. Its power was maximized, unlike Yi Chen, who could not bring out the true power of the firmament sword and the Xianwu divine armor. Enveloped in the black cloud of the cloak, Yi Chen felt his spirit being blinded, unable to sense the existence of time. Then, a pale ghostly hand grew larger and larger, reaching out with unavoidable speed. Radiant sword will, break for me. In the face of desperation, Yi Chen was calm. In his spirit sea, the radiant sword spirit vibrated violently. Then, a dazzling but not blinding light spread out from Yi Chen. The radiant sword will was open and upright. Although it was not as indestructible as the immortal sword will, nor did it have the killing power of the destruction sword will, with it, light was everywhere. Under the assault of the radiant sword will, cracks appeared in the impenetrable black clouds. The radiant sword will leaked out through the cracks, allowing Yi Chen to sense the time and space outside. Heaven and earth roam. There was no time to lose. Yi Chen used the heaven and earth roam movement technique and escaped through the cracks in the black clouds. In the instant that he escaped from the black clouds, Yi Chen activated his trump card, the Sword of Hell. A blood-red sword shadow shot out from Yi Chen's right eye. This blood-red sword shadow was a combination of the will of hell, the destruction sword will, and the golden soul power. Each of these three was not to be underestimated. Even the creator, Yi Chen, did not know how strong their combined power was. After all, there was no suitable test subject. Pu. The blood-red sword shadow sank into the 9-yin ghostly sage's head. Ah! A scream rang out, and the 9-yin ghostly sage's 7 orifices spewed out thick, blood-red smoke like a wriggling snake. His eyes, in particular, shot out 2 beams of blood-red light. His aura grew weaker and weaker, until even his body became blurry, no longer as clear as before. Yi Chen had completely underestimated the power of the Sword of Hell. Whether it was the Golden Soul power or the Tier 9 Destruction Sword will, they were both abilities of a demigod. They should have been able to injure a beginner demigod, let alone the illusion of the 9-yin ghostly sage. It works. Yi Chen's eyebrows twitched, and 2 blood-red sword shadows shot out from his right eye. As the 2 blood-red sword shadows shot out, more than half of Yi Chen's golden soul sea disappeared. One more, and the entire golden soul sea would dry up. These 2 blood-red sword shadows were very effective. The 9-yin ghostly sage's head exploded, and his body dissipated. The black cape on his back also disappeared into the void, vanishing. Impossible. 3-yin ghostly lord was dumbfounded. He could not imagine that Yi Chen had actually defeated the illusion of Lord 9-yin. He knew very well how strong Lord 9-yin was. Everyone in hell knew that. Although the strength of his illusion was far from the real body, it still had many tricks up its sleeves. Break. Without further ado, Yi Chen held the firmament sword and slashed open the Yin Dragon Mountain's defensive great array. In the next moment, countless demonic beasts and ghosts rushed out. Yi Chen made a grabbing motion, grabbing the bewildered gold sovereign. His figure flickered, distorting the space-time and disappearing without a trace. There were too many demons and ghosts imprisoned in Yin Dragon Mountain. Faced with such a situation, 3-yin ghostly lord did not dare to leave the ghostly temple. He was afraid that the moment he did, he would be devoured cleanly by these demons and ghosts, leaving not a single drop behind. But at this moment, a cold snort rang out, and space and time suddenly froze. In the next instant, an endless black cape spread out, enveloping the fleeing demons and ghosts. No matter how much the legendary ghostly lords howled, it was useless. They could not resist the power of the heavenly ghost treasure. The black cape gradually shrank, draping itself over the body of a cold middle-aged man. It was 9-yin ghostly sage. This was a projection of 9-yin ghostly sage. It was even stronger than the previous illusion, and it was not an exaggeration to call this projection the real ghostly sage. The black cape flapped without any wind. Large numbers of demons and ghosts were once again imprisoned in Yin Dragon Mountain, and the protective array was activated once more. With the power of the ghostly sage, it was even sturdier than before. Lord 9 Yin. 3 Yin ghostly lord and the other ghostly lords rushed out of the ghostly temple, kneeling on one knee. 9 Yin ghostly sage looked in the direction that Yi Chen had left, his face cold. When Yi Chen had used the crimson sword shadow, he had already pierced through space and time, sending his own power over. But he had still been a step too slow. Seal the news. Besides you, if anyone else knows about this, you will be held responsible. 9 Yin ghostly sage was still very prideful, and did not want others to know about this. Yes. 3 Yin ghostly lord shuddered. He knew very well that if news got out, it would damage Lord 9 Yin's reputation, and he would not have a good ending. After 9 Yin ghostly sage left, 3 Yin ghostly lord heaved a sigh of relief. Then, as if recalling something, he turned and barked to his ghostly lords, "All of you, remember this. If anyone spreads word of what happened today, I will make him beg for death. Don't worry, Lord. We will not risk our lives." 3 Yin ghostly lord nodded. That was true. Even if these ghostly lords were not afraid of him, they should be afraid of Lord 9 Yin's harsh punishment. He had nothing to worry about. Thinking up to this point, Yi Chen's figure involuntarily flashed through his mind. What an audacious person, even making Lord 9 Yin suffer a loss. Chapter 14:11. You are. Above the Milky Way, the Golden Supreme looked at Yi Chen blankly. The other party's strength shocked him, but why did the other party save him? He did not remember the Human Race Alliance having such a powerful Supreme, nor did he remember knowing or having a relationship with such a Supreme. Everything was too sudden. I am. Yi Chen introduced his identity in detail, not leaving out a single detail. After listening to Yi Chen's introduction, the Golden Supreme's jaw dropped, and he could not close it for a long time. The other party was his future son-in-law? That was too much of a monster. Had he been imprisoned for hundreds of thousands of years? This was the only reasonable explanation, but the Golden Supreme did not think that his sense of time was so weak that he did not even know how much time had passed. How is my daughter doing? The Golden Supreme asked eagerly. Very good. Yi Chen nodded. Just thinking about you. Is that so? Seems like she has already remembered her childhood. The Golden Supreme sighed. I did not expect things to develop to this point. After so many years, I have also woken up. Since I have become a ghostly lord, it is a new life, a new person. Forcefully interfering will only cause me to bleed. Obviously, the Golden Supreme was referring to Red Lotus Ghostly Lord. Uncle, I heard that ghostly lords can also recover the memories of their past lives, Yi Chen said. The Golden Supreme laughed bitterly. Legends can, but that is a legend after all, and the requirements are too harsh. One needs to find a stone of 3 lives and drink a mouthful of the spring of the past to recover their memories. The stone of 3 lives is very rare even in hell. Among the 10 sages of hell, Heaven Slayer Ghostly Sage and Phoenix Ghostly Sage each have one. The spring of the past is one of the 9 springs of hell, and ordinary people cannot find it at all, because it exists in the past. One needs to reverse time in the correct area to find the spring of the past. So troublesome? Yi Chen frowned. If he guessed correctly, the Heaven Butcher Ghost Sage should have been the supreme of the demons or a demigod in his previous life, and only became the Hell Ghost Sage later on. If he wanted to borrow the stone of 3 lives from him, it would be good enough if he could come back alive, let alone borrow it. As for the Phoenix Ghost Sage, this was a breakthrough point. After all, he was one of the ancestors of the Phoenix clan. Since he had the stone of 3 lives, he might have the memories of his previous life, so he might be able to borrow the Stone of Three Lives. As for the Spring of the Past, it was quite troublesome. There were a total of 9 springs in the infernal realm, and each of them existed only in legends. The Spring of the Past came from the past, and not just anyone could see it. Yi Chen was not confident that he could find it. Of course, the most troublesome thing was still the 9-yin ghostly sage. Even if he could find the Stone of Three Lives and the spring water of the past, it would be useless if he could not come into contact with Red Lotus ghostly lord. Yi Chen had already witnessed the strength of the 9-yin ghostly sage. It was no exaggeration to say that even 100 of him would not be a match for the 9-yin ghostly sage's true body. The difference in strength was too great. After leaving the Sky River, Yi Chen and the Golden Supreme Martial Artist returned to the 4 vital star domains. The moment she saw the Golden Supreme Martial Artist, Xu Jing teared up and hugged him. Before she was 10 years old, she had a happy family. One day, her mother passed away. Her father stood there in a daze for a few days, then sealed her up and sent her to a foreign world. She had been in a deep sleep until she woke up. Although she was fortunate enough to meet Yi Chen, the sorrow in the depths of her heart could not be erased. "Daughter, I'm sorry." The Golden Supreme Martial Artist felt that he was very selfish. For the sake of his wife, he had given up his daughter. He was not fit to be a father. "I don't blame you." Xu Jing had already found out the cause of the matter from Yi Chen. "Yi Chen, from now on, my daughter is in your hands. You must not let her down, or else you will disappoint me." The Golden Supreme Martial Artist had wanted to say that he would not forgive him, but after thinking about Yi Chen's strength, he decided not to. He was only a super supreme martial artist, and could not compare to the future son-in-law of a legendary supreme martial artist. "Don't worry, uncle." Yi Chen nodded. After solving the problem, Xu Jing finally became a supreme martial artist after 3,000 years. As a golden dragon, Xu Jing, who had become a supreme martial artist, was many times stronger than ordinary supreme martial artists. She was a powerful supreme martial artist from the start. The Golden Supreme Martial Artist also taught Xu Jing his strongest body-refining martial art, the Golden Battle Body. Although the Golden Battle Body was not as good as the Golden Body 9 Revolutions, the Golden Supreme Martial Artist had already cultivated the Golden Battle Body to the highest realm, enough to withstand the attack of a mid-level legendary Supreme Martial Artist, even better than the Golden Buddha Supreme Martial Artist. With his guidance, Xu Jing's Golden Battle Body improved by leaps and bounds. 1,000 years later, she reached the peak of the 5th level of the Golden Battle Body, while the Golden Battle Body was only at the 6th level. Murong Qingcheng was not willing to fall behind. 1,000 years later, she also became a supreme martial artist. At this time, there were only 10,000 years left before entering the primal chaos battlefield. "I'll go and ask for a body-refining martial art for you." Murong Qingcheng was equivalent to half a dark demon. Yi Chen planned to ask for the cultivation method of the dark demon body from the 6-winged supreme martial artist. "How do you want it?" Murong Qingcheng asked. "I have my own ways." Yi Chen smiled mysteriously. 30 years later. On a planet in the demon domain. That detestable sword, Venerable Green Lotus? The 6-winged supreme martial artist was furious. This sword, Venerable Green Lotus, was too shameless. He actually dared to come to the demon domain alone and force him to hand over the cultivation method of the dark demon body. When the first demon Venerable successfully cultivates the Demon King Golden Body, you will suffer. Apart from the Demon Tyrant Body, the demons had an even stronger body-refining martial art, the Demon King Golden Body. This body-refining martial art could only be cultivated by the Great Demon King bloodline. It was said that when cultivated to the highest realm, even a demigod would be helpless against it. Moreover, it could stimulate the dark power in the Great Demon King bloodline and help the first demon Venerable master the law of darkness. Hell's Time Mountain. Ghost Sage Tu Tian was a white-haired, majestic old man. Together with him was the first demon Venerable with the Great Demon King bloodline. Time Mountain, the power of time is especially turbulent. While we are talking, it might have already been 10 or 100 years. If I'm not wrong, the future spring must be hidden in the future spacetime of Time Mountain. Hell had 9 springs, and the future spring was one of them. Is the future spring really so magical? The first demon Venerable asked. Ghost Sage Tu Tien said, "It will only be more magical than what I said. However, you must remember that risk and wealth always go hand in hand. The flow of time in the future spring is thousands of times faster than that of Time Mountain. Perhaps you will die of old age in the future spring. It doesn't matter. If I die of old age in there, it proves that I am nothing more than this." The first demon Venerable said. "All right, I hope you can come back alive. Be careful, I want to speed up the flow of time and find the future spring." Ghost Sage Tu Tien roared, and the power of time and space around him surged. It was not much inferior to the power of time of the Mountain of Time. In the next moment, the space around the two changed unpredictably. Sometimes, there was no one, sometimes, there were several ghost lords fighting, and sometimes, there was a temple. After an unknown period of time, a meandering spring appeared in the Mountain of Time. It flowed and gushed. Listening to this sound, one could not help but be intoxicated. "Go in," Ghost Sage Tu Tien hurriedly said. The first demon Venerable nodded and flew towards the spring. With a splash, the first demon Venerable's figure sank into the spring. Seeing this, Ghost Sage Tu Tien dispersed his Ghost Sage power. The surrounding spacetime rebounded until it returned to its original state. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.